What if some of the people around you aren't fully human? For years, a controversial theory has suggested the existence of a human-alien hybrid program, a secret effort to create beings that look human but carry extraterrestrial DNA. According to some accounts, these hybrids are designed to blend in perfectly, living normal lives while hiding a very different origin. Witness testimonies, alleged abductions, and conspiracy theories all point to one unsettling idea. What if they're not coming from the stars anymore, because they're already here? In this video, we explore the mystery behind the human-alien hybrid program and the theory that they may already be walking among us. Look around you, on the street, in the grocery store, sitting across from you on the subway. Ordinary faces living ordinary lives. But what if some of those faces aren't entirely human? What if, hidden among us, there exists a population that represents humanity's most profound secret and perhaps its most unsettling future? This is not science fiction. This is not fantasy. This is the documented testimony of thousands of people across the globe who claim to have encountered, interacted with, and in some cases, given birth to beings that are neither fully human nor fully alien. Welcome to the investigation of the human-alien hybrid program, a phenomenon that challenges everything we think we know about our species, our planet, and our place in the cosmos. The story begins not in the sterile laboratories of government facilities or the classified briefing rooms of military installations, but in the bedrooms and backyards of ordinary people. For decades, individuals from every continent, every culture, and every walk of life have reported experiences that follow remarkably consistent patterns. They speak of being taken from their beds in the middle of the night, transported aboard craft of unknown origin, and subjected to medical procedures that focus intensely on human reproduction. They describe seeing children who look almost human but possess qualities that set them apart. Eyes that are slightly too large, skin that seems to emanate a subtle luminescence, an unsettling wisdom that contradicts their apparent age. These witnesses describe a program, methodical and vast in scope, that appears to be creating a new form of life by blending human and extraterrestrial genetics. The implications are staggering. If even a fraction of these accounts are accurate, it means that for at least 70 years, and possibly much longer, an intelligence not of this earth has been conducting a genetic engineering project of unprecedented scale. It means that the human genome, shaped by millions of years of evolution, is being deliberately altered and merged with something fundamentally other. It means that there may be beings walking among us right now who represent a bridge between humanity and whatever intelligence lies beyond our world. And perhaps most disturbing of all, it means that this has been happening without the informed consent or even awareness of the vast majority of humanity. The phenomenon first entered public consciousness in a significant way in the early 1960s, though historical accounts suggest the activity may stretch back far earlier into human history. The modern wave began with isolated reports of strange encounters, people waking to find themselves paralyzed in their beds as unusual beings stood over them. These early accounts were dismissed as sleep paralysis, hallucinations, or the overactive imaginations of attention seekers. But as the decades progressed, the reports didn't fade away. Instead, they multiplied. Researchers began to notice patterns, consistencies that appeared across cultural and geographic boundaries. The beings described were remarkably similar. The procedures reported followed the same basic sequence, and most significantly, the apparent purpose became increasingly clear: the creation of hybrid offspring. Dr. David Jacobs, a historian who spent over 3 decades investigating this phenomenon, conducted hundreds of hypnotic regressions with individuals claiming abduction experiences. What emerged from this research was a picture of a program operating with clinical precision and long-term strategic planning. Abductees reported having eggs and sperm harvested through sophisticated medical procedures. Women described being implanted with hybrid fetuses, carrying them for several weeks or months, and then having them removed during subsequent abductions. Both men and women reported being shown hybrid children during later encounters and being told, implicitly or explicitly, that these were their offspring. The beings conducting these procedures commonly described as having gray skin, large black eyes, and slight builds, appeared to be following a specific protocol, one that had been refined over many iterations. The question that immediately arises is why? If an extraterrestrial intelligence possesses technology capable of interstellar travel, advanced genetic engineering, and the ability to evade detection by Earth's military and scientific establishments, why would they need to create hybrids? What purpose could possibly be served by blending their genetics with ours? The answers that emerge from decades of research and testimony are as varied as they are unsettling. Some researchers believe the program represents an attempt by a dying or genetically compromised alien species to revitalize their gene pool with human genetic material. Others suggest the hybrids are being created as a bridge species, beings who can survive in Earth's environment while possessing the cognitive and perhaps technological capabilities of their non-human progenitors. Still others propose that the program represents preparation for a future in which humans and aliens will coexist, either through gradual integration or following some catastrophic event that makes full-blooded humans unable to survive in Earth's changed environment. The evidence for this program exists in multiple forms, though none of it meets the rigorous standards that would satisfy mainstream science or compel government acknowledgement. There are the testimonies themselves, now numbering in the tens of thousands globally. These accounts display a consistency that is difficult to explain away as cultural contamination or mass hysteria, particularly when examining cases from isolated populations with no access to Western media or UFO literature. There are physical traces, unexplained scars that appear overnight, often in locations consistent with tissue sampling or implant insertion. There are missing time events where individuals lose hours or even days with no memory of what occurred, only to recover fragments through hypnotic regression or spontaneous recall. There are medical anomalies, pregnancies that disappear without miscarriage, genetic markers that don't match either parent, and in rare cases, children born with characteristics that puzzle medical professionals. Consider the case of Angela, a woman from Nebraska who had never reported any unusual experiences until, at age 28, she became pregnant despite medical documentation stating she was infertile due to ovarian cysts. The pregnancy proceeded normally for 8 weeks, confirmed by 3 separate doctors and multiple ultrasounds. Then, overnight, the pregnancy vanished. No miscarriage, no medical explanation, just a suddenly flat stomach and negative pregnancy tests. Confused and distressed, Angela underwent hypnotic regression with a certified therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. What emerged was a memory of being taken aboard a craft, placed on a table, and having the fetus removed by beings she described as having gray skin and enormous black eyes. She was shown the fetus, now in some kind of container, and was told through telepathic communication that the child would be cared for and that she would see it again. 3 years later, Angela reported another abduction experience in which she was presented with a small child, perhaps 3 years old, with pale skin, unusually large eyes, and wispy blonde hair. The being accompanying the child indicated to Angela that this was her daughter and that the child needed to bond with her human parent. Angela spent what felt like an hour holding and playing with the child before being returned to her bed. She woke the next morning with a small scoop mark on her thigh and an overwhelming sense of loss. Stories like Angela's are not isolated incidents. They represent a pattern that has been documented across the globe. Dr. John Mack, a Pulitzer Prize-winning psychiatrist from Harvard Medical School, risked his professional reputation to investigate these claims in the 1990s. What he found convinced him that something real and profound was occurring, even if the phenomenon didn't fit neatly into our current understanding of reality. Dr. Mack conducted rigorous psychological evaluations of experiencers and found them to be, by and large, psychologically healthy individuals with no predisposition toward fantasy or delusion. They weren't seeking attention. Many were deeply reluctant to share their experiences for fear of ridicule. They weren't profiting from their stories. Most remained anonymous. What they were seeking was understanding, validation, and answers to experiences that had left them fundamentally changed. The hybrid children and adults described by experiencers display characteristics that set them apart from fully human individuals. Physically, they often appear largely human, but with subtle differences that create an unsettling sense of otherness. Their eyes are frequently described as larger than normal, sometimes with unusual colors or an intensity of gaze that seems to penetrate into one's thoughts. Their skin may have an unusual texture or tone, appearing either extraordinarily pale or possessing a faint luminescence. They tend to be thin, with delicate bone structure and fine features. Their hair is often described as very fine and light-colored, sometimes almost translucent, but the differences go beyond the physical. Witnesses consistently report that hybrid children display cognitive abilities far beyond their apparent age. They may communicate telepathically, demonstrate knowledge of things they couldn't possibly have learned, or show emotional maturity that seems impossible for their physical development stage. The progression of the hybrid program appears to occur in stages or generations. First-generation hybrids, the offspring of one human parent and one alien parent, display the most obvious non-human characteristics. They may have difficulty functioning in Earth's environment, appearing uncomfortable with our atmosphere, gravity, or light levels. Second-generation hybrids, the offspring of a first-generation hybrid and a human, or two first-generation hybrids, appear more human but retain enhanced abilities and some unusual physical characteristics. By the third or fourth generation, witnesses report encountering hybrids who could walk among humans without detection, appearing entirely human but possessing abilities that set them apart: enhanced intuition, telepathic capabilities, unusual healing abilities, or an innate understanding of complex systems and technologies. This generational progression suggests a long-term project, one that has been underway for multiple decades and may continue for decades or centuries more. The apparent goal is to create beings who are genetically stable, capable of reproduction, and able to thrive in Earth's environment while retaining whatever qualities the non-human intelligence wishes to preserve or introduce into the hybrid population. Some researchers believe we are now seeing fourth and fifth generation hybrids integrated into human society, indistinguishable from other humans, except for their unusual abilities and, perhaps, an underlying sense of not quite belonging to either human or alien civilization. The emotional impact on human experiencers is profound and complex. Many describe feeling violated by the procedures, particularly the reproductive aspects that occur without consent. They report trauma symptoms consistent with any form of assault or medical abuse, anxiety, depression, difficulty with intimate relationships, and a pervasive sense of loss of bodily autonomy. Yet paradoxically, many also report feelings of connection to the hybrid children they've encountered. Maternal and paternal instincts don't disappear simply because the offspring is not fully human. Experiencers describe longing to see their hybrid children again, worrying about their welfare, and grieving the loss of the opportunity to raise them. This emotional complexity makes the phenomenon even more difficult to dismiss as simple fantasy or delusion. People don't typically invent experiences that cause them ongoing psychological distress and complicated grief. The beings conducting these procedures, most commonly described as the Greys, but also including other entity types such as taller, more human-appearing beings often called Nordics, and reptilian entities, appear to have specific roles within the program. The Greys are most often associated with the medical procedures themselves, working with clinical efficiency and showing little emotion or empathy for the human experience. The taller, more human-appearing beings sometimes serve as liaisons or overseers, occasionally offering explanations or reassurances to confused and frightened abductees. Some researchers have suggested this indicates a hierarchy within the alien intelligence, with different species or castes serving different functions within the hybrid program. The technology employed in these procedures is consistently described as far beyond current human capabilities. Abductees report being moved through solid walls and windows, floating up beams of light into waiting craft, and being held in states of paralysis through means that leave no physical restraints. The medical equipment they encounter appears to be controlled through thought or subtle hand gestures rather than physical controls. Scanning devices pass over their bodies without contact, yet seem to provide complete internal analysis. Genetic material is harvested through procedures that leave minimal scarring and appear to operate at a level of precision that makes our current medical technology seem primitive. The craft themselves are described with remarkable consistency: smooth, metallic, or organic-appearing interiors, ambient lighting with no visible source, rooms that seem larger on the inside than should be possible given the external dimensions, and a sense of living technology that responds to the presence and needs of the beings operating it. One of the most compelling aspects of the hybrid program phenomenon is the consistency of reports across different populations. Indigenous peoples of the Amazon, suburban Americans, European professionals, African villagers, and Asian students describe remarkably similar experiences despite having no contact with each other and often no access to Western UFO literature or media. This cross-cultural consistency suggests either a genuine phenomenon occurring globally or a shared aspect of human psychology that manifests in remarkably uniform ways. Mainstream psychology has attempted to explain these experiences through sleep paralysis, false memories implanted through suggestion, or cultural narratives that shape individual experiences. Yet none of these explanations adequately account for the physical evidence, the multiple witness events, or the experiences of individuals who had never heard of alien abduction before their own encounters. The physical evidence, while not conclusive, is more extensive than often acknowledged. Ground traces at alleged landing sites, showing unusual soil composition changes, burned vegetation in geometric patterns, and elevated radiation levels. Photographic and video evidence of craft displaying flight characteristics that defy known physics. Radar confirmations of objects tracked by military and civilian systems moving at speeds and making maneuvers impossible for human-created aircraft. Medical evidence including unexplained implants removed from abductees' bodies, composed of unusual metallic alloys and surrounded by biological material that shows no signs of the inflammatory response normally triggered by foreign objects. Genetic anomalies in individuals claiming hybrid ancestry, showing DNA markers that puzzle geneticists. None of this evidence, individually, proves the existence of an alien hybrid program, but collectively, it creates a picture that is difficult to dismiss entirely. The question of informed consent is central to the ethical dimension of this phenomenon. If these accounts are accurate, then thousands or potentially millions of human beings have been subjected to medical procedures, including reproductive manipulation, without their knowledge or permission. This would represent a violation on a scale that dwarfs any human ethical breach in recorded history, yet the beings conducting these procedures appear either unaware of or unconcerned with human concepts of autonomy and consent. Some researchers suggest this may indicate a fundamentally different ethical framework, one that operates from a collective or species-level perspective rather than an individual rights perspective. If the hybrid program is meant to ensure the survival of multiple species through genetic integration, the aliens conducting it may view individual consent as less important than species-level survival. This doesn't make the violation any less real for those experiencing it, but it may explain the apparent disregard for human autonomy. The hybrid program, if real, represents humanity's first encounter with a post-biological future. The beings creating these hybrids may come from civilizations millions or billions of years older than ours, civilizations that long ago transcended the limitations of purely biological evolution. They may have learned to engineer their own genetics with precision, eliminating disease, extending lifespan indefinitely, and enhancing cognitive and physical capabilities. The creation of human-alien hybrids may represent an attempt to share this post-biological existence with humanity, preparing us for a transition we don't yet understand we're making. Or it may represent something more unsettling, the replacement of pure humans with a new species better suited to whatever future awaits Earth. As we delve deeper into this investigation, we will examine the specific mechanics of the hybrid program, how abductions occur, what procedures are performed, and how the hybrid offspring are developed and integrated. We will hear directly from those who claim to have experienced this phenomenon, individuals who have nothing to gain and much to lose clues by sharing their stories. We will explore the possible motivations behind such a program, from genetic rescue to planetary preparation. We will confront the uncomfortable possibility that humanity is not the apex species on this planet, and that our genetic future may be determined by intelligence that operates beyond our comprehension or control. The question is not whether these accounts are strange or unsettling. The question is whether they are true. And if they are, what does that mean for the future of the human species? The abduction phenomenon. The phenomenon begins in the darkest hours of the night, when consciousness is at its most vulnerable and the boundary between waking and sleeping grows thin. This is when they come, not announced by sirens or accompanied by military escort, but silently, almost gently, slipping through the walls of homes as if matter itself parts for them. The typical abduction experience follows a pattern so consistent across thousands of reports that researchers have been able to create a detailed timeline of events. Understanding this pattern is crucial to understanding the hybrid program, because it is during these abductions that the core procedures of genetic harvesting and hybrid creation occur. The experience typically begins with a sudden awakening, though whether the individual was actually asleep or simply had their consciousness suppressed is unclear. The person finds themselves paralyzed, unable to move anything except perhaps their eyes. This paralysis is unlike the sleep paralysis that occurs naturally during REM sleep. It feels imposed, as if an external force has taken control of the body's motor functions. The room may feel different, charged with a strange energy, or exhibiting unusual properties. Lights may appear, blue or white or amber, glowing with an intensity that seems to have depth, as if the light itself is three-dimensional. Electronics may malfunction. Digital clocks frozen at a particular time, phones dead despite being fully charged, televisions or computers turning on spontaneously. Then come the beings. They may appear suddenly, manifesting in the room without entering through any door, or they may emerge from the unusual lights. Their appearance varies somewhat in details, but certain characteristics remain remarkably consistent. The most commonly reported entities, the beings that have come to be known as Greys, stand approximately 3 to 5 feet tall with disproportionately large heads dominated by enormous black eyes. These eyes are frequently described as the most disturbing feature, not only because of their size, but because of the sense of consciousness behind them, an intelligence that seems ancient and utterly alien. The eyes are often described as liquid-looking, completely black, with no visible pupil or sclera, and capable of inducing a deep sense of compulsion or compliance. Their skin is gray or grayish-blue, smooth and almost translucent, with a texture that seems neither quite organic nor mechanical. The body is thin, fragile-appearing, with long arms ending in 3 or 4 long fingers. They typically wear no clothing, or if they do, it is so form-fitting as to be indistinguishable from skin. Communication occurs not through speech, but through direct mental contact. Thoughts, instructions, or reassurances appear in the abductee's mind as if they were their own thoughts, except they carry information the person knows didn't originate with them. These telepathic communications are often described as having a different quality than human thought, as if they operate at a frequency or in a manner that is recognizable as foreign, even while being completely comprehensible. The messages are typically simple and directive. Don't be afraid. We won't hurt you. This is necessary. You've been chosen. You will remember later. Sometimes there are explanations, glimpses of the larger purpose, though these are often vague or presented in symbolic rather than literal terms. What follows is the removal of the abductee from their normal environment. This occurs through means that seem to violate the understood laws of physics. People report floating upward toward a ceiling that becomes translucent or simply doesn't impede their passage. They float through walls and windows, sometimes while lying horizontal in their paralyzed state, other times in a standing or sitting position. In many cases, they report ascending through a beam of light that appears to have substance, as if light itself has become solid enough to support and transport mass. They float upward into a craft that may be hovering silently above their home, a craft that was invisible or undetectable moments before. This beam of light is one of the most frequently reported aspects of the abduction experience, described across cultures and decades, always with similar characteristics. A defined column of light, often blue-white, that pulls the person upward with an almost gentle force while maintaining them in a paralyzed state. Inside the craft, the environment is uniformly described as clean, smooth, and lit by ambient light with no visible source. The walls may appear metallic or organic, sometimes seeming to shift between states. Rooms are often curved, with rounded doorways and a lack of sharp angles. The temperature is typically cool, but not uncomfortable. There is often a smell, variously described as metallic, chemical, sterile, or simply strange, unlike any terrestrial odor. The craft may feel larger on the inside than it appeared from outside, with multiple rooms or levels connected by curved corridors. Some abductees report seeing windows or view screens showing the earth below or the stars beyond, though whether these are actual windows or some form of projected image is unclear. The examination room, the location where the majority of the procedures occur, is dominated by a central table or platform. This table is not like human medical tables. It is often described as molding itself to the individual's body, providing support while exposing the areas the beings wish to examine. The surface may feel warm and almost alive, adjusting its contours as the person is positioned. Lighting in this room is often brighter, focused on the examination area. Instruments are present, though they often don't resemble any human medical equipment. Devices that scan the body without contact, long wands or probes that are passed over the skin collecting information, machinery that hums or emits subtle vibrations, screens or panels that display information in symbols or languages the abductee cannot understand. The medical procedures performed during abductions are invasive and focus heavily on reproductive systems. Women report pelvic examinations conducted with instruments that appear to extract eggs directly from the ovaries. The procedure is uncomfortable and sometimes painful, though many report that the beings seem to control the level of discomfort through telepathic means, either reducing pain or, conversely, being indifferent to it. A device is often described being inserted into the vaginal canal, extending upward and into the uterus, where it performs some extraction or implantation procedure. Women who have had previous abductions sometimes report having hybrid fetuses implanted during these procedures. The fetus is placed in the uterus through means that feel both mechanical and biological, and the woman is then returned to her normal life, often with a sense that something has changed in her body even if she has no conscious memory of the abduction. Male abductees report equally invasive procedures focused on sperm extraction. Many describe a device being placed over their genitals that induces an erection and collects semen through what feels like a combination of mechanical suction and vibrational stimulation. Some report being paired with a female being, either a gray, a hybrid, or sometimes a fully human-appearing woman, and being compelled to engage in sexual activity while beings observe and monitor. This pairing is not romantic or pleasurable in the way human sexuality typically is. It feels clinical, performed under duress and observation, the individual's arousal controlled through technological or telepathic means. The semen is then collected and apparently used in the hybrid program's artificial insemination procedures. Both men and women report tissue sampling, with small sections of skin, muscle, or other tissue removed from various locations on the body. These procedures leave marks, tiny scars often described as scoop marks, circular indentations that appear overnight with no explanation. The marks are typically found on arms, legs, or torso, perfectly round or oval, and while they heal, they leave permanent evidence of something having occurred. Medical professionals examining these marks have noted their unusual characteristics: the precise geometric shape, the absence of typical scarring patterns, and in some cases, the removal of multiple tissue layers in a single clean extraction that would be difficult to achieve with conventional human surgical tools. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the abduction procedures is the installation of implants. Thousands of abductees report having small objects inserted into their bodies through the nasal cavity, ears, or through skin insertion. These implants are tiny, often no larger than a grain of rice. but they appear to serve multiple functions. Some researchers believe they are tracking devices, allowing the alien intelligence to locate and monitor specific individuals throughout their lives. Others suggest the implants may serve as communication devices, facilitating the telepathic connection between the beings and the abductees. Still others propose they may be data collection devices, recording biological, neurological, or even emotional information about human functioning. In rare cases, these implants have been surgically removed and analyzed. The results have been puzzling. Objects composed of unusual metallic alloys, sometimes magnetic, often surrounded by a biological membrane that prevents the body's normal rejection response. The implants show no sign of infection or inflammatory response, despite being foreign objects, suggesting they are coated with or produce some substance that makes the body accept them as native tissue. Memory manipulation is a crucial component of the abduction experience. The vast majority of abductees have no conscious memory of what occurred during the missing time. They go to bed normally and wake up normally, perhaps feeling unusually tired or noting some odd physical marks, but with no recollection of having been taken. The memories are suppressed, locked behind what many researchers describe as a screen memory, a false memory that masks the true events. A person might remember seeing an owl outside their window, or a deer standing in an unusual location, or a dream that felt particularly vivid. Only later, sometimes years later, do the real memories begin to surface, triggered by hypnotic regression, spontaneous flashbacks, or during subsequent abduction experiences. This memory suppression appears to be technologically or telepathically induced. Many abductees report a specific moment during the procedure when a gray being will look directly into their eyes and a command is given. Forget, or you will not remember, or this is a dream. The person feels something shift in their consciousness, a fog descending over the experience, and then they are back in their bed with a sense of discontinuity but no clear memory of what occurred. This ability to suppress and manipulate human memory is one of the most disturbing aspects of the phenomenon, suggesting a deep understanding of human neurology and the capacity to edit human consciousness at will. Multiple witness abductions provide some of the most compelling evidence that these experiences are not simply individual hallucinations or psychological phenomena. In these cases, two or more people experience the same abduction event, either together or observing parts of each other's experiences. A mother and daughter taken from the same house, both waking with similar marks and eventually recovering similar memories. A husband and wife who find themselves aboard a craft, seeing each other on separate examination tables. Friends camping in a remote location who all observe a craft landing, then find hours missing from the night with vague memories of being examined. These shared experiences are difficult to explain through conventional psychological means. Mass hallucination is possible, but would require the individuals to hallucinate the same specific details, including physical evidence that appears on both parties. The emotional aftermath of remembered abductions varies widely among experiencers. Some are left traumatized, suffering from what appears to be post-traumatic stress disorder, complete with anxiety, nightmares, hypervigilance, and difficulty functioning in daily life. The trauma stems not just from the procedures themselves, but from the violation of bodily autonomy, the sense of helplessness, and the disturbing realization that one's body and genetic material have been used without consent. These individuals often struggle with relationships, particularly intimate relationships, as the abduction experiences have left them with a deep distrust and sense of vulnerability. They may develop phobias of the dark, of being alone, of sleeping, because these are the conditions under which abductions typically occur. Others have more ambiguous responses. They describe the experiences as disturbing but also strangely significant, as if they've been granted access to something profound even if they don't fully understand it. These individuals often report feeling chosen, marked as special in some way, even if they didn't volunteer for that role. They may develop an interest in consciousness, spirituality, or extraterrestrial life, feeling that their experiences have opened them to realities most people never encounter. Some even develop a sense of mission, feeling that they have a role to play in whatever larger drama is unfolding between humanity and the alien intelligence conducting these procedures. A smaller subset of abductees report positive experiences, or at least experiences with positive elements mixed among the disturbing ones. They describe encounters with beings who seem benevolent, who offer explanations or reassurances about the hybrid program's purpose. They report being shown visions of Earth's future, sometimes catastrophic scenarios that the hybrid program is meant to address. Other times, utopian visions of human-alien integration and cooperation. These individuals sometimes describe developing ongoing relationships with specific beings, recognizing the same entity across multiple abduction experiences and feeling a growing connection or even affection for them. This positive framing is controversial within abduction research, with some researchers believing it represents a form of Stockholm syndrome or manipulation by the beings to create compliant subjects, while others suggest it may indicate genuine variation in the motives and methods of different alien groups. The frequency of abductions varies dramatically among experiencers. Some report a single experience, often in childhood or adolescence, after which they are never taken again. Others describe lifelong patterns of regular abductions, occurring as frequently as once a month or as sporadically as once every few years. Many report that abductions seem to intensify during certain life stages, particularly around puberty and throughout the reproductive years, suggesting the phenomenon is timed to coincide with human fertility and developmental stages relevant to the hybrid program. Some families report multi-generational abductions, with grandparents, parents, and children all experiencing the phenomenon, suggesting that the alien intelligence tracks specific genetic lines and returns to them repeatedly across generations. The technology employed in these abductions seems to operate on principles far beyond current human understanding. The ability to move through solid matter suggests either a manipulation of molecular structure or the use of dimensional shifting that allows passage through what we perceive as solid barriers. The paralysis induced in abductees appears to involve direct control of the nervous system, shutting down motor function while leaving sensory perception intact, a level of neurological control we can barely theorize about, let alone implement. The memory manipulation indicates an understanding of memory formation and storage at a level where specific experiences can be selectively suppressed or revealed. The telepathic communication suggests either advanced technology that can interface directly with human neural activity or a natural capability that the alien beings possess, allowing direct mind-to-mind contact without the intermediary of language or physical communication methods. The craft themselves represent technology that violates understood physical laws. They move silently through the atmosphere, making instantaneous right-angle turns at speeds that would liquefy any biological occupant subjected to those G-forces in human-built aircraft. They hover motionless for extended periods with no visible means of propulsion. They accelerate from stationary to thousands of miles per hour in seconds, then vanish completely from both visual and radar observation. The materials comprising these craft show no seams, rivets, or visible construction methods, as if they were grown or manifested rather than assembled. The interior spaces sometimes seem to defy exterior dimensions, suggesting either extremely advanced space utilization or more exotic physics involving spatial manipulation or compression. Tracking the abduction phenomenon across decades reveals patterns that suggest an evolving program. Early abductions, primarily in the 1960s and 70s, focused more heavily on simple examination and tagging, with implants being installed and baseline data apparently being collected. By the 1980s and 90s, the focus shifted more clearly toward reproductive procedures, with increased reports of egg and sperm harvesting and women reporting pregnancy-related abductions. In recent decades, abductees increasingly report encounters with hybrid beings and being shown hybrid children, suggesting the program has progressed to a stage where viable hybrid offspring are being produced and developed. This progression suggests long-term planning and a program that is advancing towards some specific endpoint, though what that endpoint might be remains unclear. The question of why these particular individuals are chosen is one of the great mysteries of the phenomenon. Some abductees report family histories of sightings or unusual experiences, suggesting genetic lines are being tracked across generations. Others seem to have been chosen randomly, with no family history and no particular characteristics that would explain their selection. Some researchers propose that the selection criteria may be genetic, with the alien intelligence seeking specific genetic markers, blood types, or genetic sequences that serve their hybridization purposes. Others suggest the criteria may be more esoteric. Individuals with particular psychic sensitivities, consciousness configurations, or soul characteristics that make them suitable for the program. The beings themselves rarely offer clear explanations, instead providing vague reassurances that the person was chosen or special or needed, without clarifying what those terms mean. The abduction phenomenon represents the mechanism through which the hybrid program operates. Without these regular, systematic intrusions into human lives and bodies, the program could not exist. The hybrids being created require constant input of fresh human genetic material, monitoring of developing hybrid fetuses, and opportunities to create bonds between hybrid offspring and their human parents. The abductions, as traumatic as they are for those experiencing them, are the engine driving this unprecedented experiment in cross-species genetic engineering. Understanding the abduction experience is therefore crucial to understanding the larger implications of the hybrid program and what it might mean for humanity's future. As we continue this investigation, we'll explore what happens to the genetic material harvested during these abductions and meet the hybrid children and adults who represent the program's ultimate product. The hybrids, characteristics and development. They appear almost human. Almost. It's the uncanny valley made flesh, beings that trigger something deep in human perception that whispers, something is wrong here, something is other. The hybrids represent the culmination of decades of genetic manipulation, the blending of human DNA with something fundamentally alien. Understanding who and what they are requires examining the testimony of those who have encountered them, the descriptions of their physical and psychological characteristics, and the apparent stages of development that create increasingly human-appearing beings with each successive generation. First-generation hybrids, the direct offspring of one human parent and one alien parent, represent the most obvious merging of the two species. These beings typically display a blend of characteristics that makes them unsuitable for blending into human society undetected. They retain significant physical markers of their alien parentage while incorporating enough human genetics to be recognizable as partially human. Their heads are larger than typical human proportions, though smaller than the full grays. Their eyes are significantly larger than human eyes, but smaller than their alien parents, sometimes retaining the full black appearance of gray eyes, other times showing some color and visible sclera that makes them appear more human. Their skin tone varies, but is often pale, sometimes with a grayish or bluish tint, occasionally with a slight translucent quality that makes veins and internal structures faintly visible beneath the surface. The bodies of first-generation hybrids are typically thin and delicate appearing, with bone structure that seems fragile compared to robust human frames. Their limbs may be slightly elongated in proportion to their torsos. Their fingers are often longer and more delicate than human fingers, sometimes numbering 4 rather than 5. Hair is present but unusual, often very fine and light in color, sometimes white or platinum blonde even in childhood, with a texture that doesn't quite match human hair. Some first-generation hybrids have very little body hair, missing the eyebrows, eyelashes, and fine body hair typical of humans. Their facial features tend toward a delicate elfin quality with small noses, small mouths, and pointed chins. But the differences go far beyond the physical. First-generation hybrids display cognitive abilities that far exceed human norms, even accounting for their apparent age. A hybrid child who appears to be 3 or 4 years old may display reasoning capabilities and knowledge equivalent to a human teenager or adult. They are described as eerily quiet, observing everything with an intensity and focus that is unsettling in a child. When they do communicate, it is often telepathically or with a maturity and vocabulary far beyond their apparent years. Their emotional affect is often subdued compared to human children, lacking the exuberance and spontaneity typical of human child development. They may show emotion, but it feels muted, controlled, as if they are observing and mimicking human emotional responses rather than naturally feeling them. Abductees, who report encountering first-generation hybrids, often presented as their offspring, describe deeply conflicted emotions. There is an immediate recognition, a sense of connection that goes beyond logic and must be instinctual or genetic. The human parent often feels a surge of protective instinct, an urge to nurture and bond with this being that is partially their child. Yet simultaneously, there is revulsion or fear triggered by the obvious inhuman characteristics. The large eyes, the odd skin texture, the telepathic intrusion into one's mind, all provoke a sense of danger or wrongness. This emotional duality creates lasting psychological impact as the human parent grapples with loving something that also frightens them, wanting to protect a child they cannot take home and may never see again. The gray beings often facilitate these encounters deliberately, bringing human parents to rooms where young hybrids are present and encouraging interaction. A mother might be presented with several hybrid toddlers and told to hold them, play with them, teach them human warmth and emotion. The stated purpose is bonding, allowing the hybrid children to experience human emotional connection and maternal care. The encounters are brief, rarely lasting more than an hour in perceived time, and always end with separation. The human parent is returned to Earth, and the hybrid children remain in the alien environment. The grief this induces is profound and lasting. Parents describe mourning children they can never raise, worrying about offspring they can never protect, loving beings they may never see again. It is a unique form of loss, one that most people couldn't understand, even if the experiencer could speak openly about it. Second-generation hybrids represent a significant step toward beings who can function in human society. These are the offspring of first-generation hybrids and humans, or two first-generation hybrids. The alien genetics are diluted, the human characteristics strengthened. Second-generation hybrids often look predominantly human, though unusual or striking in appearance. Their eyes, while large, fall within the upper range of human variation, rather than being obviously alien. They may have unusual eye colors, green or gold, or violet shades that are rare but not impossible in human populations. Their skin tone appears fully human, perhaps pale or with fine texture, but no longer carrying the grayish or translucent qualities of first-generation hybrids. Their build is human, though they tend toward the slender end of the spectrum, with fine bone structure and delicate features. Where second-generation hybrids still stand apart is in their abilities and bearing. They retain enhanced cognitive capabilities, though these might manifest as exceptional intelligence or talents, rather than obviously superhuman mental powers. They may be gifted mathematicians, artists, or musicians, displaying abilities that seem prodigious but not impossible for humans. They often retain some level of telepathic or intuitive capability, though it may be weaker than first-generation hybrids, or manifest as exceptional empathy, the ability to read people's emotional states with uncanny accuracy or intuitive leaps in understanding that seem to bypass normal reasoning processes. They frequently report feeling different from other humans, a sense of not quite fitting in, of being separate or other, even though they cannot pinpoint why. Third and fourth generation hybrids blur the lines further. These beings could walk through human society undetected, appearing fully human in every visible respect. The alien genetics are present but recessive, perhaps manifesting only in enhanced abilities that could be attributed to human genetic variation or exceptional talent. A fourth-generation hybrid might be the person who always seems to know what you're thinking, who has premonitions that come true with unsettling frequency, who never gets sick, who seems to intuitively understand complex systems without formal training. They would be unusual humans, certainly, but nothing that would obviously mark them as something other than human. The integration of these later-generation hybrids into human society appears to be one of the goals of the program. If the reports are accurate, there may be thousands or tens of thousands of hybrids now living among human populations, attending schools, working jobs, forming relationships, and in some cases, reproducing with humans to create yet another generation that is genetically even more human, but still carrying whatever alien genetic material the program intends to introduce into the human population. This represents a form of slow-motion genetic modification of the human species, introducing new genetics not through overt mass procedures, but through gradual integration and interbreeding over multiple generations. Some hybrids are apparently aware of their status, knowing or suspecting they are not fully human. These aware hybrids sometimes serve as intermediaries, appearing more frequently in abduction scenarios to help ease frightened human abductees or to explain aspects of the program. They may appear in daily life as well, though often keeping their awareness private. They describe feeling pulled between two worlds, neither fully human nor fully alien, not entirely comfortable in either identity. They may feel called to missions or purposes they don't fully understand, experiencing urges to be in particular places, pursue particular fields of study, or seek out specific individuals. Some researchers believe these aware hybrids are being positioned as future leaders or facilitators, intended to help guide humanity through whatever transition the hybrid program is preparing us for. Other hybrids appear to be completely unaware of their status, integrated into human society and living fully human lives without conscious knowledge of their hybrid nature. These individuals might experience unusual phenomena throughout their lives, strange dreams, missing time, abilities they can't explain, but attribute these to normal human variation rather than hybrid origins. They may have faint memories or dreams of unusual beings, but these are dismissed as imagination. They live human lives, have human relationships, and in many cases, reproduce with humans, further spreading the hybrid genetics through the population without conscious intention to do so. The abilities attributed to hybrids vary, but follow certain patterns. Enhanced telepathic or empathic abilities appear most commonly. Hybrids are described as being able to sense emotions, sometimes reading thoughts, communicating mind-to-mind with other hybrids or with the gray beings. This telepathic capacity is reportedly something they must learn to control, as young hybrids may be overwhelmed by the constant input of others' thoughts and emotions until they develop the ability to shield or filter. Enhanced physical capabilities are reported less frequently, but include superior healing, resistance to disease, excellent vision and hearing, and in some cases, abilities that seem paranormal from a human perspective, moving small objects telekinetically, influencing electronic devices, or perceiving events at a distance. The developmental process for hybrid children occurs primarily in the alien environment rather than on Earth. Abductees who report multiple encounters with hybrid children often note that the children age more rapidly than human children, suggesting either that the hybrids have faster developmental cycles or that time operates differently in the environment where they are raised. A hybrid infant 1 year might appear to be a toddler the next time the human parent encounters them, and a young child within a few years. Whether this is true accelerated growth, time dilation effects, or misperception due to the altered states in which these encounters occur is unclear. But the consistency of the reports suggests that hybrid development does not follow the same timeline as human development. The environment where young hybrids are raised appears to be adapted specifically for them. Abductees report seeing nursery-like rooms filled with containment vessels, clear cylindrical or rectangular containers in which very young hybrid fetuses or infants float in liquid. These containers are often described as being arranged in rows or circular configurations connected to monitoring equipment that displays information in unknown symbols or languages. Slightly older hybrid children are reported in group settings, being cared for by gray beings or by adult hybrids, sometimes with human abductees brought in to provide emotional bonding and human interaction. The facilities are clean and temperature controlled, but sterile and institutional, lacking the warmth and personalization of human nurseries or homes. The educational process for hybrid children appears to occur primarily through direct information transfer rather than traditional teaching methods. Several abductees have reported observing young hybrids sitting motionless while appearing to be in deep concentration or in some kind of trance state. The interpretation offered is that information is being downloaded directly into their minds, teaching them language, mathematics, history, and other knowledge without the years of schooling human children require. This would explain how hybrid children display knowledge far beyond their apparent age and developmental stage. They are not learning through experience, but through direct cognitive input, a teaching method that bypasses the slow process of human education. The emotional development of hybrids is one of the aspects the beings seem most concerned with, based on abductee reports. This is apparently why human parents are brought to interact with hybrid children, to model and teach human emotional responses. The gray beings themselves appear to have limited emotional affect, operating with clinical efficiency but little warmth or empathy. The hybrids, carrying human genetics, apparently have the capacity for emotion but must learn how to feel and express it. Human parents describe being asked to hold hybrid babies, make eye contact, speak soothingly, and show affection. They are encouraged to play with hybrid toddlers, teaching them to laugh, to be curious, to experience joy. The beings observe these interactions carefully, seemingly studying how human emotion works and how to instill it in the hybrid children. Some abductees report hybrid children who seem emotionally stunted or disturbed, displaying confusion about emotions or expressing them inappropriately. A hybrid child might mimic human laughter, but at moments that aren't funny, or display affection in ways that feel mechanical rather than spontaneous. These awkward attempts at human emotional expression are poignant, suggesting beings who are trying to learn something that doesn't come naturally, working to bridge a gap between their alien genetics and programming and the human emotional complexity they are meant to incorporate. The most successful hybrids, the ones who appear most human and well-adjusted, are often those who have had the most interaction with human parents and caregivers. The long-term fate of hybrid children is one of the great unknown questions. Abductees rarely report encounters with hybrid children beyond adolescence or young adulthood, leading to speculation about what happens to them as they mature. Some researchers believe they are integrated into human society, placed into adoptive situations, or given false identities and documentation that allows them to live as humans. Others believe they remain primarily in the alien environment, perhaps serving roles within that civilization, possibly becoming the next generation of beings who conduct abductions and continue the hybrid program. Still others propose that the hybrids represent a completely new species, intended to inherit Earth after humans, or to coexist with humans as a bridge between species. There are accounts from individuals who believe they are hybrids themselves, either aware of it from childhood or discovering it later in life through unusual experiences and characteristics they cannot explain. These self-identified hybrids describe lifelong feelings of not belonging, of being fundamentally different from the humans around them. They report missing time experiences, memories of unusual beings, and abilities that set them apart. They often feel pulled toward studying consciousness, extraterrestrial phenomena, or spiritual topics, as if seeking to understand their own origins. Some have undergone genetic testing, hoping to find anomalies that would confirm their hybrid status, though current human genetic testing is likely not sophisticated enough to identify alien genetic markers, even if they were present. The psychological reality of being a hybrid, whether actual or perceived, creates unique challenges. These individuals exist in a liminal space, feeling neither fully human nor able to claim any other identity with certainty. They may experience discrimination if they speak openly about their beliefs, facing ridicule or psychiatric intervention. They may struggle with intimate relationships, fearing that others would reject them if they knew the truth of what they suspect they are. They often report feeling isolated, unable to find community or understanding among humans, while having no access to whatever alien civilization their genetics may partially derive from. Some find community among other self-identified hybrids or experiencers, creating support networks of those who share similar beliefs and experiences. The existence of human-alien hybrids, if confirmed, would represent the most significant biological development in human history. It would mean that human evolution is no longer occurring purely through natural selection, but is being directed by external intelligence. It would mean that the genetic boundaries we thought defined species are more permeable than believed, that DNA from Earth and from elsewhere in the cosmos can be successfully merged to create viable offspring. It would raise profound questions about identity and humanity. At what point does a hybrid cease to be human? If a being is 3/4 human genetically, are they human, half human, 1/4? Or does any alien genetic contribution, no matter how small, make them something other than human? These are not merely academic questions if hybrids are living among us, forming relationships, and having children who further spread hybrid genetics through the population. The hybrid program's ultimate goal remains speculative, but several theories predominate. The most benign interpretation is that a dying alien race is attempting to preserve their genetics by merging with humanity, creating a new species that carries on their legacy while revitalizing their failing genome. A more unsettling interpretation is that humans are being gradually replaced, with hybrid populations slowly supplanting pure humans over generations until Earth is inhabited by beings who look human but carry significant alien genetics and possibly alien agendas. Another theory suggests preparation for environmental change. If Earth is heading toward conditions that would make pure humans unable to thrive, the hybrids might be engineered to survive in these altered conditions, representing humanity's only hope for species survival. Each theory has support from various aspects of the phenomenon and from different interpretations of what the beings have communicated to abductees. What is clear is that the hybrids are real to those who have encountered them, and if they are indeed walking among us, humanity may already be in the midst of a transformation we don't yet recognize. The children in your local school, the co-workers in your office, the neighbors on your street, some of them might be carrying genetics from beyond Earth, representing a new chapter in human evolution or the beginning of humanity's end as a purely terrestrial species. As we continue this investigation, we'll explore what governments and military installations may know about this program and why, if hybrids are among us, this information has been kept from public awareness. Government knowledge and institutional. The question that haunts every serious investigation into the hybrid program is simple and terrible. Do they know? Do the governments of the world, particularly the United States government with its vast intelligence apparatus and military superiority, know that an alien intelligence has been conducting a genetic engineering program on human populations for decades? And if they know, what have they done about it? The answers that emerge from decades of research, leaked documents, whistleblower testimony, and careful analysis of government behavior patterns paint a picture of institutional awareness coupled with deliberate suppression, a policy of controlled denial that has kept this information from public consciousness, while select groups within the military and intelligence community have monitored, studied, and in some cases, possibly collaborated with the very beings conducting these procedures. The modern history of government involvement with the UFO phenomenon begins officially in 1947, though evidence suggests awareness extends back much further. Project Sign, Project Grudge, and most famously Project Blue Book represented the Air Force's public face of UFO investigation, operating from 1947 through 1969. These projects investigated thousands of UFO sightings, ultimately concluding in the Condon Report that UFOs pose no threat to national security and did not represent evidence of extraterrestrial visitation. This conclusion allowed the Air Force to officially close Project Blue Book and claim the government was no longer investigating UFOs. But this was, by all available evidence, a carefully constructed lie. The investigation didn't end. It simply went dark, moving from public projects to classified programs buried within the military-industrial complex where congressional oversight was minimal and public awareness non-existent. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the scientific consultant to Project Blue Book, underwent a remarkable transformation during his tenure. He entered the project as a skeptic, fully expecting to debunk UFO reports as misidentifications and hoaxes. But after investigating hundreds of cases, interviewing credible witnesses including military pilots, radar operators, and police officers, and examining physical evidence, Hynek became convinced that something real and unexplained was occurring. After Project Blue Book's closure, he continued investigating independently, creating the Center for UFO Studies and developing the classification system for close encounters that remains in use today. Before his death, Hynek stated publicly that he believed some UFO cases represented genuine encounters with non-human intelligence and that the government knew far more than it was revealing. His transformation from skeptic to believer, documented through decades of writings and interviews, carries significant weight precisely because he had no reason to fabricate or exaggerate. His professional reputation was damaged by his UFO advocacy, not enhanced by it. The military's encounters with UFOs are extensive and well documented, even if official explanations often strain credulity. The 1952 Washington, D.C. flap, where radar operators at Washington National Airport tracked multiple unknown objects over the Capitol and White House on consecutive weekends, while pilots visually confirmed the object's presence, remains one of the most significant mass sightings in history. The objects demonstrated flight characteristics impossible for 1952 technology, or indeed for any known current technology: instantaneous acceleration, right-angle turns at high speed, hovering followed by rapid departure. The Air Force explanation, temperature inversions causing radar anomalies, satisfied few, particularly the experienced radar operators, who stated flatly that what they tracked were solid objects, not atmospheric phenomena. The Belgian UFO wave of 1989 to 1990 provides another case where military involvement is undeniable. Belgian Air Force F-16 fighters were scrambled on multiple occasions to intercept triangular craft that were being tracked on military radar, while simultaneously being observed visually by ground witnesses, including police officers. The F-16s obtained radar locks on the objects, which then demonstrated acceleration from hovering to over 1,000 miles per hour in seconds, G-forces that would kill any biological occupant of conventional aircraft. The Belgian military not only acknowledged these encounters but held a press conference to discuss them, releasing radar data and gun camera footage. This openness by a NATO military stands in stark contrast to American military policy and suggests that the level of secrecy varies by nation and by what various governments have learned or been told about the phenomenon. The most direct military encounter with the abduction phenomenon itself may have occurred at Rendlesham Forest in England in December 1980. Multiple United States Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Woodbridge witnessed a craft land in the forest near the base perimeter. Senior officers, including Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, investigated and filed official reports describing a triangular craft with strange symbols, beams of light that seemed to be scanning the ground, and radiation readings above normal background levels at the landing site. But the case goes deeper. Some personnel involved later reported experiencing missing time during the encounter. Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston, who approached the landed craft and touched it, later underwent hypnotic regression that revealed memories of receiving binary code information during the encounter. Code that, when translated, allegedly contained geographic coordinates of various ancient and future locations. Airman John Burroughs reported health problems, including heart issues, that the military initially refused to acknowledge or treat, until Senator John McCain's office intervened, and Burroughs received medical records showing he'd been exposed to something during the incident. The military's handling of Rendlesham, initial documentation followed by dismissal and ridicule of witnesses, exemplifies the pattern of behavior that suggests institutional knowledge being actively suppressed. The abduction phenomenon itself entered military and intelligence awareness early. The Betty and Barney Hill case of 1961, the first widely publicized abduction account, was investigated not just by civilian researchers, but by military personnel. Documents released through Freedom of Information Act requests show that military intelligence officers interviewed the Hills, that their experience was taken seriously at classified levels, and that the investigation continued long after the public story faded from headlines. Why would military intelligence spend significant resources investigating what was publicly dismissed as a delusion or hoax? The obvious answer is that the military suspected or knew that something real had occurred, something with national security implications. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, as abduction reports multiplied, certain patterns in government response emerged. Abductees who were military personnel or who worked in sensitive positions sometimes reported being debriefed by men claiming to be from military intelligence or government agencies. These interrogations would focus on exactly what the abductee remembered, whether they had been given any information during the abduction, and whether they had told anyone else about their experience. The subtext was clear. The government was monitoring the abduction phenomenon, tracking who was being taken, and attempting to manage the flow of information about these events. Abductees were sometimes warned not to discuss their experiences publicly, told it was a matter of national security, or simply intimidated into silence through implications that their cooperation was not optional. The most explosive claims regarding government knowledge come from alleged whistleblowers, individuals claiming to have worked in classified programs dealing directly with extraterrestrial contact and the hybrid program. While such claims must be approached with appropriate skepticism, some carry sufficient detail and corroboration to warrant serious consideration. Dr. Michael Wolff, before his death in 2000, claimed to have worked on classified programs involving extraterrestrial contact, stating that the government had been in communication with multiple alien species since the 1950s and that agreements had been reached allowing certain abduction activities in exchange for technological information. Wolff claimed that the hybrid program was known to select government officials and that human-alien hybrids were being integrated into society with government awareness and possibly assistance. Colonel Philip Corso, who served on President Eisenhower's National Security Council and later headed the Foreign Technology Desk at the Army's Research and Development Department, published claims before his death that the Roswell crash had indeed involved an extraterrestrial craft, that alien bodies had been recovered, and that technology from the craft had been back-engineered and seeded into American industry, leading to developments including fiber optics, integrated circuits, and night vision technology. More relevant to the hybrid program, Corso described one of the recovered aliens as having a large head, huge eyes, and rudimentary digestive and reproductive systems, suggesting the being was engineered rather than naturally evolved. He speculated that these beings might themselves be some form of android or biological robot, possibly created by another species, and that their interest in human genetics might relate to their own genetic limitations. Senator Barry Goldwater, who served on the Senate Intelligence Committee and was a major general in the Air Force Reserve, stated in multiple letters and interviews that he had attempted to gain access to a secret facility at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base rumored to contain alien artifacts and information. He was denied access by General Curtis LeMay in terms that he described as the angriest he'd ever seen LeMay, suggesting that whatever was being protected carried the highest possible classification. Goldwater's statements are significant because he had no reason to fabricate such claims and every reason to avoid the ridicule that came from acknowledging his interest in UFO-related matters. His willingness to speak about being denied access to information suggests that he believed such information existed and that its classification level exceeded even his senatorial clearance. The institutional mechanisms for maintaining secrecy around the hybrid program and extraterrestrial contact more broadly appear to involve compartmentalization, ridicule as a weapon, and the selective use of disinformation. Compartmentalization, standard practice in classified military programs, means that individuals working on different aspects of a project never see the full picture. A scientist analyzing unusual biological samples might have no idea where they came from. A radar operator tracking unusual craft might file reports that disappear into classified databases without feedback. An intelligence officer debriefing an abductee might not know whether the information is being compiled for threat assessment or for some other purpose. By ensuring that no single person, except those at the very top, understands the full scope of what is known, the secret can be maintained even among those who are working within the system. Ridicule has proven remarkably effective as a tool of suppression. The 1953 Robertson Panel, a CIA-sponsored group of scientists assembled to review UFO data, concluded that UFOs themselves were not a direct threat, but that public interest in UFOs could be exploited by enemies, and that the debunking of UFO reports should be a goal of government. Following this recommendation, a campaign of ridicule was implemented. Scientists, media personalities, and public figures who took UFOs seriously were mocked. Witnesses were portrayed as unreliable. The term flying saucer itself became synonymous with crackpottery. This cultural conditioning has been extraordinarily effective, creating an environment where even credible witnesses hesitate to report sightings for fear of ridicule, and where serious scientific investigation of the phenomenon is career suicide for academics. The same ridicule has been applied to abduction accounts, with experiencers portrayed as mentally ill, attention-seeking, or simply delusional. This social pressure keeps most experiences from being reported and ensures that those who do report are not taken seriously by mainstream institutions. Disinformation represents the most sophisticated level of information control. Rather than simply denying all UFO and abduction phenomena, intelligence agencies have apparently engaged in deliberately spreading false information mixed with true information, making it impossible for researchers to distinguish fact from fiction. Elaborate hoaxes have been perpetrated, documents have been forged and leaked, individuals claiming insider knowledge have later been exposed as frauds, all creating a murky landscape where truth is indistinguishable from deception. This may be intentional strategy. If the field is polluted with disinformation, any real information that leaks out becomes just another questionable claim in a sea of noise. Researchers waste time chasing false leads, the public becomes confused and disengaged, and the truth remains hidden not through denial but through camouflage among lies. The question of whether governments have merely observed the hybrid program or have actively collaborated with it represents the darkest possibility. Some researchers and alleged whistleblowers claim that agreements were reached, possibly as early as the 1950s, in which certain alien groups were permitted to conduct abductions in exchange for technological information and with the understanding that a list of abductees would be provided to the government. These claims suggest a horrifying scenario in which governments essentially traded the bodily autonomy of their own citizens for technology and information, a bargain that would represent the ultimate betrayal of the social contract between state and citizen. Support for this collaboration theory comes from multiple sources. Some abductees report that their experiences occurred on military bases, or that they were transported to underground facilities that appeared to be terrestrial rather than extraterrestrial in origin. They describe seeing military personnel working alongside alien beings, suggesting cooperation rather than confrontation. Some report hybrid children being held in facilities that appeared to be human-constructed. If accurate, these accounts suggest that the hybrid program is not simply something happening to us, but something some elements of government are participating in, providing facilities, security, and possibly even human subjects in exchange for whatever benefits the alien intelligence offers in return. The underground base phenomenon adds another layer to this possibility. For decades, reports have circulated of vast underground facilities constructed beneath military installations, some allegedly housing joint human-alien research projects. Dulce Base in New Mexico is the most infamous, allegedly a multi-level underground facility where humans and aliens collaborate on genetic experiments, including human-animal hybrids and human-alien hybrids. Former military personnel claiming to have worked at such facilities describe nightmare scenarios: humans held in cages, genetic experiments being conducted, hybrid beings in various stages of development. While these claims are difficult to verify and may represent disinformation, the consistency of reports across multiple alleged whistleblowers and the specificity of details provided suggests that something is driving these accounts, whether actual experience, sophisticated psychological operations, or some combination thereof. The military's official position on abductions is that they are not a matter of military concern, that they represent individual psychological experiences without national security implications. Yet this official position is contradicted by the pattern of military personnel experiencing abductions, by the documented cases of military interest in specific abduction cases, and by the security classification applied to certain UFO-related incidents that involve military witnesses. If abductions were truly not a concern, why would there be any classification at all? Why would witnesses be debriefed and warned to remain silent? The disconnect between official dismissal and actual institutional behavior suggests that the public position is strategic rather than honest. International cooperation on the cover-up appears to exist as well, though different nations have adopted different strategies. While the United States has maintained strict denial, countries like France, Brazil, and Chile have been more forthcoming, releasing UFO files and acknowledging that some cases remain unexplained. Yet even these more open nations have released only certain information while presumably retaining the most sensitive data in classified archives. The phenomenon is global, The abduction reports come from every continent, yet no government has publicly acknowledged the hybrid program or taken action to protect its citizens from ongoing abductions. This suggests either that governments feel powerless to stop it, that they have chosen not to intervene for strategic reasons, or that agreements prevent them from interfering. The psychological impact of governmental denial on experiencers cannot be overstated. Imagine experiencing profound trauma, violation, having your reproductive material taken without consent, encountering your hybrid offspring, and then finding that the institutions meant to protect you, police, military, medical establishment, government, not only don't believe you, but actively work to discredit and silence you. This institutional gaslighting compounds the trauma of the abduction itself, leaving experiencers feeling abandoned, crazy, and utterly alone. Some experiencers develop deep mistrust of all authority. Others go silent, never reporting their experiences and suffering in isolation rather than face ridicule and dismissal. The cover-up, if it exists, has turned what might be humanity's most significant challenge into something that cannot be collectively addressed because it cannot be collectively acknowledged. The question remains, why maintain the cover-up? Several possibilities emerge. The first is prevention of panic. Government officials may believe that public knowledge of an ongoing alien abduction program would cause social breakdown, religious crisis, economic collapse, or mass panic. The second possibility is protection of existing power structures. If the existence of vastly superior alien technology became undeniable, it would undermine faith in government protection, military supremacy, and religious certainty about humanity's place in creation. The third possibility is that disclosure would reveal government complicity, that certain officials made agreements that traded human rights for technology, and that revealing this would destroy public trust in institutions entirely. The fourth possibility is that the aliens themselves demand secrecy as a condition of whatever agreement or non-interference policy is in place, and governments comply out of fear of reprisal or loss of whatever benefits the relationship provides. The slow drip of disclosure that has occurred in recent years suggests that the policy of absolute denial may be shifting. The Pentagon's acknowledgement of the UFO phenomenon, the release of military footage showing craft with inexplicable flight characteristics, congressional hearings on unidentified aerial phenomena, and testimony from high-ranking military officials admitting these objects are real and unexplained, all represent movement toward acknowledgement. Whether this will eventually extend to acknowledgement of the abduction phenomenon and hybrid program remains to be seen. Some researchers believe we are being prepared gradually for full disclosure, that the public is being acclimated slowly to avoid the panic that sudden revelation might cause. Others believe this limited disclosure is itself a form of controlled release, acknowledging only what can no longer be denied while the deeper truths remain hidden. What is undeniable is that a gap exists between what governments publicly acknowledge and what they actually know. The pattern of institutional behavior, classification, witness intimidation, ridicule as policy, disinformation campaigns, all point to a level of knowledge that far exceeds public disclosure. Whether that knowledge extends to full awareness of the hybrid program, to cooperation with it, or merely to frustrated observation of something they cannot control or explain, the governments of the world know more than they are telling. And until that changes, until the institutions meant to protect citizens acknowledge what is happening to them, the hybrid program will continue in darkness, producing generation after generation of beings who represent humanity's future or its replacement, while the masses remain unaware that their species is being fundamentally altered without their knowledge or consent. As we continue this investigation, we will explore historical precedents that suggest this program may be far older than the modern era, stretching back into humanity's ancient past. Historical precedents and ancient accounts. The hybrid program may seem like a modern phenomenon, something that emerged in the 20th century alongside flying saucers and atomic weapons. But a deeper examination of human history, mythology, and ancient texts reveals something far more unsettling: the possibility that this program has been operating throughout the entirety of human civilization, perhaps even predating what we recognize as civilization itself. The beings, the procedures, the hybrid offspring. All of it appears in accounts stretching back thousands of years, hidden in plain sight within the stories we dismissed as myth, the religious texts we read as metaphor, and the folklore we relegated to superstition. What if these ancient accounts were not symbolic, but literal? What if humanity has been subject to this genetic intervention, not for decades, but for millennia? And what if the very origin of modern humans involves this same process of alien genetic manipulation? The oldest written text in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Sumeria, tells the story of a king who was 2/3 god and 1/3 human. We read this as poetic exaggeration, a way of expressing that Gilgamesh was exceptional. But what if the ancient scribes meant exactly what they wrote? What if Gilgamesh was literally a hybrid being, the product of genetic combination between human and something other? The text describes him as possessing superhuman strength, extraordinary height, and wisdom beyond mortal capacity. His companion Enkidu is described as being created by the gods from clay, a being who was neither fully human nor fully divine, covered in hair and living among animals before being civilized. These descriptions match remarkably well with accounts of hybrid beings from modern abductees, entities that appear almost human but possess enhanced abilities and characteristics that set them apart. The Sumerian texts speak repeatedly of the Anunnaki, beings who came from the heavens and who played a direct role in human development. These texts describe the Anunnaki as creating humans to serve as workers, fashioning them from existing primitive humans mixed with divine essence. The exact mechanism is unclear in translation, described variously as mixing clay with blood of slain gods, or combining the essence of the gods with primitive terrestrial beings. But the core concept is explicit. Humanity was deliberately created through the intervention of beings from the sky who manipulated what was here to create something new. This is genetic engineering, described in the language available to Bronze Age scribes. The Anunnaki are described as taking human women as wives, producing offspring called the Nephilim, who were giants, mighty warriors, beings of renown who possessed abilities far beyond normal humans. This interbreeding between sky beings and terrestrial humans, producing hybrid offspring, forms a central narrative in the oldest human texts. The Hebrew Bible contains one of the most explicit accounts of human-non-human hybridization. Genesis chapter 6 states, "When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose." The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. This passage has puzzled theologians for millennia. Who were the sons of God? Traditional interpretation claims they were fallen angels, but the text itself is more ambiguous. The Hebrew term used, Bene Elohim, translates literally as sons of the gods or sons of the powerful ones. These beings came from elsewhere, found human women desirable, bred with them, and produced hybrid offspring who were giants and possessed remarkable abilities. The text makes clear this was not metaphorical union, but literal breeding that produced physical offspring. The Book of Enoch, excluded from most biblical canons but preserved in Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, provides far more detail about these events. Enoch describes how 200 watchers, divine beings tasked with observing humanity, descended to earth and took human women as wives. The text names the leaders of these watchers and describes how they taught humanity forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, cosmetics, weaponry, astronomy, and most significantly, the secrets of genetics and biology, described as cutting of roots and the solving of spells. The offspring of these unions, the Nephilim, are described in disturbing detail as giants who consumed everything, who turned against humanity, and who began breeding with animals to create monstrous hybrids. The text presents this as a corruption of creation, a violation of natural order that led to divine intervention through the flood. But from another perspective, it describes a genetic intervention program beings from elsewhere, altering human and animal genetics deliberately, producing hybrid forms that the text's author viewed as abominations, but which may have been intentional experiments in cross-species engineering. The apocryphal Book of Jubilees provides additional detail, stating that the Watcher's offspring taught women to pierce their wombs and cause abortions, suggesting medical procedures involving reproductive manipulation. The text describes the Nephilim as producing offspring of 3 different types, suggesting generations or varieties of hybrids, each with different characteristics. Some grew to enormous size, others possessed particular skills or abilities, creating a hierarchy of hybrid beings. The text emphasizes that these hybrid lines persisted after the flood, that not all were destroyed, and that their descendants continued to exist among humanity. This parallels modern accounts of multi-generational hybrid programs producing successive generations that become increasingly integrated into human populations. Greek mythology is saturated with accounts of gods breeding with humans to produce demigod heroes. Heracles, Perseus, Achilles, Helen of Troy, and dozens of other legendary figures were described as being half human, half divine, possessing abilities that exceeded human norms. These heroes had superhuman strength, unusual beauty, exceptional intelligence, and often tragic fates that resulted from existing between 2 worlds, neither fully mortal nor fully divine. The gods who bred with humans are described as descending from Mount Olympus or the heavens, taking human form to seduce mortals, and then returning to their celestial realm. The offspring were left to navigate human society while possessing abilities and characteristics that set them apart. This narrative structure mirrors modern abduction accounts. Beings coming from the sky, engaging in reproductive activity with humans, producing offspring with enhanced abilities, and those offspring struggling with their dual nature and their place in human society. Roman accounts continue these themes. The founding of Rome itself involves divine-human hybridization, with Romulus and Remus being the offspring of the god Mars and a human Vestal virgin. Julius Caesar claimed descent from Venus through Aeneas, asserting divine bloodline as justification for power. The Roman imperial cult regularly claimed divine ancestry for emperors, and while we can dismiss this as political propaganda, it reflects a cultural belief that gods and humans could produce offspring, and that these hybrid bloodlines possessed special status and abilities. The consistency of these claims across ancient Mediterranean civilizations suggests a shared understanding, possibly rooted in actual events, that beings from the heavens could and did breed with humans to produce exceptional offspring. Celtic and Norse mythology present similar patterns. The Tuatha De Danann of Irish legend were described as a race that came from the sky, possessed magical abilities and advanced knowledge, and sometimes interbred with humans before eventually retreating to an invisible realm that coexisted with but was separate from the human world. Their offspring, individuals with fairy blood or second sight, possessed abilities like prophecy, healing, and enhanced intuition. Norse mythology speaks of unions between gods and humans, and of the Alfar, elf-like beings who sometimes took human lovers and produced children who existed on the boundary between human and otherworldly realms. These children, called changelings in folklore, often appeared strange or other, with unusual eyes, otherworldly beauty, or abilities that frightened ordinary humans. The changeling phenomenon itself deserves closer examination as a possible historical record of the hybrid program. Across European folklore, countless accounts exist of human infants being stolen by fairy folk and replaced with changeling children who appeared similar but wrong. These changeling children were described as having odd appearances, large eyes, strange skin, unusual intelligence, or conversely unusual dullness, and an otherworldly quality that parents recognized as fundamentally different from their birth child. The stolen human children were said to be taken to the fairy realm, sometimes returning years later, having not aged, or having aged differently than should be possible. This narrative structure maps precisely onto modern abduction accounts of hybrid children, human genetics being taken, hybrid children being left or presented to human parents, the hybrids appearing almost but not quite human, and human children being taken to the alien realm where time operates differently. What medieval Europeans described as fairy abduction, we now describe as alien abduction, but the core phenomenon appears identical. Indigenous American traditions across both continents contain accounts of sky beings who descended, interacted with humans, and sometimes produced offspring. The Hopi speak of the ant people who lived underground and helped humanity during cataclysms, described as having large heads and eyes and possessing advanced knowledge. Hopi tradition also speaks of star beings who travel between worlds and who have a special relationship with humanity, sometimes taking human form and living among the tribe. The Lakota tell of the star people, beings from the Pleiades who came to Earth and shared knowledge with humans, and who prophecy says will return. These accounts describe tall, luminous beings with large eyes who could appear and disappear at will, and who took special interest in certain individuals, sometimes bringing them to the sky world and returning them with knowledge or abilities they didn't possess before. South American traditions include the Viracocha of Incan legend, described as tall, pale-skinned beings who came from the sky and taught humanity agriculture, architecture, and astronomy before departing with promises to return. The Nazca lines in Peru, visible only from significant altitude, may have been messages or markers for aerial visitors, created by cultures that had no apparent reason to create ground art, visible only from the sky unless they expected it to be seen from above. The sudden appearance of advanced civilizations like the Olmec, Maya, and Inca with sophisticated astronomical knowledge, architectural capabilities, and mathematical systems has led some researchers to propose intervention by advanced intelligence that accelerated human development in specific locations. While mainstream archaeology attributes these developments to human ingenuity alone, the legends of these cultures consistently attribute their knowledge to beings who came from the stars and taught them directly. Asian traditions are equally rich with accounts. Hindu texts describe the devas, celestial beings who could take human form and who sometimes produced offspring with humans. The Mahabharata and Ramayana contain explicit accounts of divine beings using flying vehicles called vimanas, engaging in aerial battles, using advanced weapons, and interacting extensively with human populations. The text describes genetic manipulation as well, with beings being created or altered through divine intervention. The character Karna, born to a virgin who was impregnated through divine means without physical contact, provides a parallel to Marian virgin birth traditions in Christianity. Japanese Shinto tradition speaks of the kappa, beings that live between the water and land worlds, who sometimes interact with humans and are blamed for mysterious disappearances and strange children born with unusual characteristics. Chinese tradition includes accounts of dragon-human hybrids, individuals born from unions between celestial dragons, and human women who possessed special abilities and often became emperors or sages. African traditions, less documented in written form but preserved through oral history, include accounts of the Chitauri, described by Zulu tradition as beings who came from the stars and who altered primitive humans to create modern humanity as a slave species for mining gold. This account, preserved by Zulu shaman Credo Mutwa, parallels Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki, creating humans as workers almost exactly, despite being from a culture with no apparent contact with ancient Mesopotamian civilization. The consistency suggests either a universal human mythology or actual events witnessed by separated human populations who recorded them in the context of their own cultural frameworks. The Dogon people of Mali possess detailed astronomical knowledge of the Sirius star system, including the presence of Sirius B, a white dwarf companion star not visible to the naked eye and not confirmed by Western astronomy until the 1970s. The Dogon attribute this knowledge to the Nomo, amphibious beings who came from Sirius and taught them astronomy and other sciences before departing. How an isolated African tribe knew about Sirius B centuries before telescopes capable of observing it were developed remains unexplained by conventional means. Medieval European accounts provide historical documentation of encounters that mirror modern abduction experiences. Accounts of demonic attack, succubi and incubi, beings that came in the night and had sexual contact with sleeping humans, producing offspring called cambion, who were neither fully human nor fully demon, all present the same pattern. The Church interpreted these experiences through a theological framework, but the experiential descriptions match modern accounts precisely. Paralysis during sleep, entities appearing in the room, forced sexual contact, hybrid offspring. What changed was not the phenomenon, but the explanatory framework. Where medieval saw demons, we see aliens, but the reported experiences remain consistent across centuries. The fairy abduction accounts of medieval and Renaissance Europe are particularly significant. Documented cases exist of individuals disappearing for what they experienced as days or weeks, only to return to find years or decades had passed. They described being taken to an underground or otherworldly realm, sometimes held there, sometimes undergoing examinations or being made to serve the fairy folk. They described seeing hybrid children, half human and half fairy, and sometimes being forced to nurse or care for these children. Upon return, they often bore scars or marks, had missing time memories, and struggled to reintegrate into human society because of their experiences. These accounts, documented in court records, church investigations, and historical chronicles, were taken seriously by medieval authorities. People disappeared in ways that suggested supernatural intervention. They returned changed, often traumatized, with consistent stories. Despite geographic separation, the phenomenon was real enough that ecclesiastical and secular authorities developed protocols for dealing with suspected fairy abduction victims. Religious ecstatic experiences may also represent encounter phenomena described in spiritual terms. Mystics throughout history have reported being taken up to heaven, encountering divine beings, receiving knowledge or visions, and returning transformed. St. Paul's account of being taken up to the third heaven, where he saw things too wonderful to describe. St. Teresa of Avila's descriptions of being penetrated by the spear of divine love in experiences that were clearly physical and transformative, and countless other mystical accounts may represent genuine contact experiences interpreted through the religious frameworks available to those experiencing them. The physical effects reported by mystics, stigmata, levitation, mysterious pregnancies, missing time during ecstatic states, transformation of consciousness, parallel effects reported by modern contactees and abductees. The phenomenon may be consistent across history, with only the interpretive framework changing based on cultural context. The virgin birth narrative that appears across multiple religious traditions deserves particular attention. Marian virgin birth in Christianity, the virgin birth of Buddha to Queen Maya, the virgin birth of Qi to Jiang Yuan in Chinese legend, the virgin birth of Horus to Isis in Egyptian mythology. Cultures across the globe contain accounts of women becoming pregnant through divine or supernatural means without human sexual contact. We can interpret these as theological metaphor, ways of expressing the special status of religious founders. But we can also consider them as accounts of artificial insemination or genetic manipulation by advanced beings, described in the only terms available to ancient peoples who witnessed pregnancy occurring without sexual intercourse. If the hybrid program has operated throughout history, these virgin birth accounts may represent early generation hybrid production, divine human genetic combination producing individuals with special abilities and missions who founded religions or transformed civilizations. The question that arises from this historical examination is why? If the hybrid program has operated for thousands of years, what is its purpose? Why the long-term commitment to gradually altering human genetics across millennia? Several possibilities emerge. The first is that this represents an extremely long-term project to transform humanity into something else, a process that must occur gradually over many generations to be stable and successful. Rapid genetic change would be rejected, would cause instability, would be obvious to human populations and possibly resisted. But slow change, occurring across hundreds or thousands of years, becomes integrated into human evolution itself, becomes inseparable from what we consider natural human development. The second possibility is that the program has accelerated in modern times, that ancient interventions were sporadic or experimental, but that the systematic program we see today represents a ramping up of activity in response to human technological development or environmental crisis. Ancient accounts may represent early phases, test programs, or maintenance interventions. while the modern program represents a final push towards some goal that is now urgent in ways it wasn't previously. The atomic age, environmental degradation, human population reaching unsustainable levels, or approaching some cosmic deadline might have triggered intensification of a program that previously operated at lower frequency. The third possibility is that multiple alien intelligences have been conducting different programs throughout history, that what we see is not one unified program, but several overlapping interventions by different groups with different motives and methodologies. Some may have created hybrids for their own purposes, others may have intervened to assist human development, still others may have opposed these interventions. Human history and mythology may reflect this complex situation, with different cultures encountering different alien groups and recording those encounters as interactions with their particular gods or supernatural beings. The warfare between gods in mythology, the rivalries and conflicts described in ancient texts may reflect actual conflicts between different alien factions regarding what should or shouldn't be done with humanity. The archaeological evidence is fragmentary but suggestive. Elongated skulls found in Peru, Egypt, and other locations, skulls with cranial capacities that exceed human norms and bone structures that differ from typical human skulls in ways that cannot be explained by cranial binding alone. Genetic analysis of some of these skulls has revealed unusual anomalies, though mainstream science attributes these to degraded DNA rather than considering the possibility of non-human genetic contribution. The Paracas skulls, in particular, have provoked controversy, with some geneticists claiming the DNA shows markers that don't match any known human population and suggesting possible contamination or errors in analysis rather than accepting the results at face value. Ancient art provides another form of evidence. Cave paintings depicting beings with large heads and eyes, sometimes wearing what appears to be helmets or suits, sometimes alongside craft or objects that resemble modern UFO descriptions. Sumerian cylinder seals showing the Anunnaki as distinctly different from humans, taller, with different proportions, sometimes showing what appear to be technological devices. Egyptian hieroglyphics and wall paintings showing gods with elongated heads, some with animal features combined with human bodies in ways that suggest genetic manipulation or hybrid creation. Mesoamerican art depicting serpent gods, feathered serpents, and beings that combine human and reptilian characteristics in precise anatomical detail that goes beyond symbolic representation. Across cultures with no contact with each other, similar visual motifs appear: large-headed beings, skycraft, procedures that look remarkably like modern descriptions of abduction scenarios. The implications of the historical evidence are profound. If the hybrid program has operated throughout recorded history, and likely before, then human development has never been purely natural. Everything we consider human achievement might involve guidance or intervention by non-human intelligence. The sudden appearance of agriculture simultaneously in different locations around the globe approximately 12,000 years ago, the Neolithic revolution that transformed hunter-gatherers into settled farmers within a remarkably short time period, may have involved teaching by advanced beings. The appearance of writing, mathematics, astronomy, monumental architecture, all occurring within brief time periods after hundreds of thousands of years of apparent human stasis, suggests possible intervention or acceleration of development by outside intelligence. Our religions may be based on actual contact events. Our gods may be imperfect human recollections of alien visitors. Our myths may be garbled accounts of actual genetic engineering programs. The human genome itself may contain evidence of intervention. The remarkable suddenness with which anatomically modern humans appeared approximately 200,000 years ago, the dramatic cognitive leap that occurred roughly 50,000 years ago that produced symbolic thought, art, and complex language, the lack of gradual intermediates that evolutionary theory would predict. All of this might be explained by genetic intervention that accelerated human development far beyond what natural selection alone would produce in the timeframes observed. If this historical interpretation is accurate, then humanity has never been truly independent. We have been subjects of study, of manipulation, of genetic engineering for as long as we have existed as a species. The The modern hybrid program is not an aberration or a new violation, but merely the continuation of a process that has shaped us from the beginning. We may ourselves be hybrids, the product of ancient genetic manipulation that combined terrestrial hominids with alien genetics to create something new. And the current program may be an adjustment, a refinement, or a completion of that original project, preparing humanity for whatever comes next in a process that began before written history and may extend into a future we cannot yet imagine. As we continue this investigation, we will examine the scientific perspective on these possibilities, exploring whether human genetics show any evidence of artificial manipulation and whether the creation of human-alien hybrids is even biologically possible. The scientific perspective: genetics, DNA, and biological possibilities. The creation of human-alien hybrids sounds like science fiction, something that violates fundamental biological principles and exists purely in the realm of fantasy. But is it? What does actual science tell us about the possibility of cross-species genetic engineering, about the malleability of DNA, and about whether beings from entirely different evolutionary lineages could successfully merge their genetic material to create viable offspring? The answers that emerge from cutting-edge genetics, evolutionary biology, and reproductive science are surprising and in some ways unsettling. While mainstream science has not, and likely will not directly address the question of human-alien hybridization due to lack of acknowledged alien genetic material to study, the principles and possibilities revealed by recent scientific advances suggest that what seemed impossible decades ago is now theoretically feasible, and what seems impossible today may be routine tomorrow. The fundamental question is whether DNA from Earth and DNA from elsewhere in the universe would be compatible enough to merge. Traditional biological understanding held that species boundaries were rigid, that reproduction could only occur between closely related species within the same genus or family, and even then usually producing sterile offspring. A horse and donkey can produce a mule, but mules are sterile. Different species of big cats can sometimes interbreed in captivity, but the offspring often have health problems. The further apart species are evolutionarily, the less compatible their genetic material becomes, until crossbreeding becomes completely impossible. This would suggest that humans and aliens, having evolved on entirely different worlds through completely separate evolutionary paths, would be so genetically incompatible that hybridization would be impossible. However, this traditional view has been challenged by recent discoveries. First, we now know that DNA is remarkably universal. The same 4 nucleotide bases, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, form the foundation of genetic coding across all life on Earth, from bacteria to humans. The genetic code itself is nearly universal, with the same 3 nucleotide codons specifying the same amino acids across virtually all terrestrial organisms. This universality is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that all life on Earth shares a common ancestor. But it also suggests something more profound. DNA may be the universe's solution to encoding biological information. If alien life is also DNA-based, or uses a similar nucleic acid coding system, then the fundamental compatibility needed for genetic engineering might exist. The discovery of nucleotide bases in meteorites and in interstellar space suggests that the chemical building blocks of DNA are cosmically common, not unique to Earth. Second, modern genetic engineering has demonstrated that species barriers are far more permeable than previously believed. Scientists routinely insert genes from one species into completely unrelated species. Jellyfish genes that produce fluorescent proteins are inserted into mice, causing them to glow under ultraviolet light. Human genes are inserted into bacteria to produce insulin or other proteins. Spider genes are inserted into goats, causing them to produce spider silk proteins in their milk. These cross-species genetic transfers work because DNA is DNA. A gene from one organism can function in another organism if properly inserted and regulated. The host organism doesn't reject the foreign DNA as long as it's integrated into the genome correctly. This suggests that if alien DNA uses similar chemical principles, insertion of alien genes into human genomes or human genes into alien genomes is theoretically possible. Third, advances in synthetic biology have shown that DNA can be artificially constructed and modified at will. Scientists have created synthetic organisms with expanded genetic codes using additional nucleotide bases beyond the natural four. They have created bacteria with entirely synthetic genomes designed on computers and built from chemical components. They have demonstrated that genetic information can be edited with precision using technologies like CRISPR-Cas9, allowing specific genes to be deleted, modified, or inserted at exact locations in a genome. If human scientists with relatively primitive technology can manipulate genetics this precisely, an alien intelligence with millions of years of technological advancement could presumably engineer genetics with far greater sophistication, overcoming incompatibilities that would stymie our current capabilities. The human genome itself contains evidence that suggests our genetics may be more malleable than we assumed. Approximately 8% of human DNA consists of sequences derived from ancient retroviruses that infected our ancestors and became permanently integrated into our germline. These viral sequences are inherited and passed down through generations. They are, in essence, foreign genetic material from a completely different type of organism that has become part of what we consider human DNA. Some of these viral sequences have been domesticated by evolution, co-opted to serve useful functions in human development, including crucial roles in placental development that allows live birth rather than egg-laying. If ancient viruses could insert themselves into the human genome and become part of human inheritance, this demonstrates that foreign genetic material can be integrated, can be passed to offspring, and can even provide beneficial functions. An advanced intelligence conducting a hybridization program could potentially use similar mechanisms to introduce alien genetic sequences into human genomes in ways that would be inherited and stable across generations. The question of viable offspring is more complex. For hybrids to be more than single-generation experiments, they must be capable of reproduction. In terrestrial cross-species breeding, offspring are often sterile due to chromosomal incompatibilities. Humans have 46 chromosomes arranged in 23 pairs. If aliens have a different number of chromosomes, their offspring might have an odd number that cannot pair properly during meiosis, the cell division process that creates eggs and sperm, resulting in sterility. However, chromosomal engineering is now possible in the laboratory. Scientists have successfully fused yeast chromosomes, reducing the 16 natural chromosomes of Saccharomyces cerevisiae to just 2 artificial chromosomes without killing the organism. They have created organisms with artificial chromosomes carrying entirely synthetic genes. If human scientists can manipulate chromosomes this dramatically, alien geneticists could presumably design hybrid genomes with stable chromosomal arrangements that allow normal meiosis and fertile offspring. The rapid development of hybrid embryos is another aspect reported by abductees that seems scientifically problematic but may be achievable with sufficiently advanced technology. Human gestation takes 9 months, a relatively long period compared to many mammals. Abductees report hybrid fetuses being removed after only weeks or months of development in the human mother, yet later encountering these offspring as apparently normally developed children. This would require either accelerated development or artificial gestation systems far more sophisticated than current human technology, but theoretically possible. We already have basic artificial womb technology in development, with animal embryos being gestated partially outside the mother's body. An advanced civilization might have perfected artificial gestation, allowing hybrid embryos to be removed from human mothers after initial development, and then brought to full term in controlled environments where development could potentially be accelerated through hormonal, nutritional, or other interventions we cannot yet imagine. The transfer of consciousness, memory, or personality traits across genetic boundaries is reported by some abductees who describe their hybrid offspring displaying personality characteristics or memories that seem to come from the human parent. This touches on one of science's deepest mysteries: the relationship between genetics and consciousness. We know that genes influence brain structure and chemistry, which in turn influence personality, cognitive style, and behavioral tendencies. Identical twins separated at birth show remarkable similarities in personality and preferences, demonstrating strong genetic influence on psychological characteristics. But whether specific memories or consciousness itself could be encoded genetically or transferred through some other mechanism remains at the frontier of scientific understanding. Some fringe theories propose that DNA acts as a quantum antenna capable of receiving and storing information beyond simple genetic code, that consciousness might be non-local and capable of interfacing with biological systems in ways we don't yet understand. If such theories have validity, hybrid offspring might indeed receive more than just physical traits from their parents. The scientific community's resistance to seriously investigating these possibilities stems partially from lack of evidence, but also from deeper issues. No confirmed alien genetic material exists for study in mainstream scientific institutions. Alleged implants removed from abductees have been analyzed, but results are typically inconclusive or attributable to terrestrial sources. Without physical evidence meeting rigorous scientific standards, the phenomenon remains impossible to study through conventional scientific methods. Additionally, the topic carries such stigma that scientists who express interest risk professional suicide. Funding for such research is unavailable through normal channels. Publication in peer-reviewed journals would be nearly impossible given the extraordinary nature of claims and lack of reproducible evidence. The scientific method requires testable hypotheses, controlled experiments, and reproducible results, none of which are possible when the phenomenon involves entities that control when and where encounters occur, and that apparently actively prevent collection of definitive physical evidence. Yet some scientists have attempted to approach the question indirectly. Population geneticists studying human genetic diversity have noted anomalies that don't fit cleanly into models of human evolution and migration. Most notably, the discovery that modern humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, extinct hominid species, means that most humans alive today carry DNA from these archaic humans. This demonstrates that separate hominid species that had been evolutionarily separated for hundreds of thousands of years could still interbreed and produce fertile offspring. If humans could successfully breed with Neanderthals despite long evolutionary separation, this suggests that species barriers within the genus Homo were more permeable than thought, and raises the question of how distant a species could be and still achieve viable hybridization with proper technological assistance. The discovery of junk DNA, the vast majority of the human genome that doesn't code for proteins and whose function was unclear, has been reinterpreted in recent years. What was once thought to be evolutionary debris, leftover sequences with no function, is now understood to include regulatory elements, structural components, and sequences whose purposes we're still uncovering. Some researchers have noted that the patterns in non-coding DNA include sequences that appear almost deliberately structured, leading to speculative proposals that these regions might contain information encoded by past genetic engineering. While mainstream genetics rejects this interpretation as pattern-seeking in noise, the mere existence of vast stretches of DNA whose functions we don't fully understand leaves open the possibility that human genomes contain elements that might be relics of or preparation for genetic modifications that aren't naturally evolved. The sudden appearance of anatomically modern humans in the fossil record has puzzled paleoanthropologists. Homo sapiens appears approximately 200,000 to 300,000 years ago in Africa, but the archaeological evidence for complex symbolic behavior, art, sophisticated tools, and cultural complexity doesn't appear until roughly 50,000 to 70,000 years ago. This massive gap between anatomical modernity and behavioral modernity is difficult to explain through purely gradual evolutionary processes. Something appears to have changed dramatically in human cognition and capability in a relatively short time period. While mainstream science proposes various mechanisms for this transition, neural reorganization, development of language, social innovations, none fully explain the rapidity and completeness of the transformation. Alternative theories suggest genetic intervention could account for this sudden leap, an upgrade to the human genome that unlocked cognitive capabilities that the basic anatomy could support, but that weren't being fully utilized. The human brain itself is anomalous in ways that have puzzled evolutionary biologists. It consumes approximately 20% of the body's energy, despite being only 2% of body mass, a massive metabolic investment that evolution would only maintain if the benefits were extraordinary. Human intelligence far exceeds what would be strictly necessary for survival in the ancestral African savanna environment where humans evolved. We have cognitive capabilities, advanced mathematics, abstract reasoning, symbolic thought, complex language, that provide no obvious survival advantage in the environment where these capabilities evolved. Why would natural selection produce brains capable of understanding quantum mechanics and composing symphonies when the selective pressures were for hunting, gathering, and social coordination in small tribal groups? Some researchers suggest this over-engineering points to intervention, that human cognitive capabilities might have been designed for purposes beyond mere survival in the ancestral environment. The genetics of human uniqueness provides additional puzzles. The genetic difference between humans and chimpanzees is remarkably small. Less than 2% of DNA sequences differ, yet the cognitive, behavioral, and physical differences are enormous. Humans have language, cumulative culture, technology, art, and civilization. Chimpanzees, despite being intelligent social primates, have none of these. The genes responsible for these dramatic differences are still being identified, but certain genes involved in brain development show signs of having been under strong positive selection in the human lineage, meaning they were rapidly modified by evolutionary pressures. CHAR1, a human-accelerated region that evolved extremely rapidly in humans compared to other primates, is involved in cortical development. FOXP2, a gene associated with language and speech, shows modifications in humans that aren't present in other primates. These rapid changes occurred recently in evolutionary time and produced dramatic functional consequences. While mainstream science explains these through natural selection responding to social and cognitive pressures, the speed and specificity of these changes could also be consistent with deliberate genetic manipulation by external intelligence. Mitochondrial DNA studies have revealed that all living humans descend from a relatively small population that lived approximately 200,000 years ago in Africa, the famous mitochondrial Eve. Y chromosome studies point to a Y chromosomal atom from roughly the same period. The genetic bottleneck evident in human populations suggests either a near-extinction event that reduced human populations to as few as 10,000 individuals, or potentially that modern humans were founded from a limited number of individuals who had undergone some genetic modification that set them apart from other archaic humans. If the hybrid program has ancient origins, this bottleneck might represent the introduction of modified genetics into a limited population that then expanded and replaced or absorbed archaic human populations. The scientific plausibility of the hybrid program ultimately depends on the technological sophistication of those conducting it. With current human technology, creating stable, fertile, human-alien hybrids would be impossible, primarily because we have no alien genetic material to work with, and our genetic engineering capabilities are still relatively crude. But technology advances exponentially. What is impossible for us today might be routine for a civilization just a few centuries more advanced and trivial for millions of years ahead. If the beings conducting the hybrid program possess technology that can manipulate matter at the quantum level, that understands consciousness and genetics at depths we haven't approached, that has been refined over millions of years of practice, then the creation of hybrids that violate our current understanding of biological limitations becomes feasible. The question for science is not whether human-alien hybridization is possible with our current understanding and capabilities. It clearly isn't, given we have no confirmed alien biology to study. The question is whether it would be possible for a sufficiently advanced intelligence, and whether the reported phenomenon displays characteristics consistent with such a program being conducted. The answer to both questions appears to be yes. The biological principles don't forbid it. They merely indicate it would require technology far exceeding ours. The consistency of reports across time and culture suggests a real phenomenon underlying the accounts. The physical evidence, while not conclusive, is more extensive than commonly acknowledged, and the gaps in our understanding of human origins, human genetics, and human uniqueness leave room for intervention theories that mainstream science doesn't seriously consider but cannot definitively rule out. What science can say with certainty is that life is not fixed and immutable. Genetics can be manipulated, species barriers can be crossed with technology, and the definition of human is more fluid than our ancestors understood. We are already beginning to modify human genetics through gene therapy and will soon face choices about designer babies and genetic enhancement. The ethical questions surrounding human genetic modification that we're beginning to grapple with, questions of consent, of natural versus artificial, of what makes us human, are the same questions raised by the hybrid program, but on a vastly larger scale. If we are on the verge of modifying our own genetics deliberately, is it really impossible to imagine that another intelligence might have been doing the same thing to us, for its own reasons, throughout our history? As we continue this investigation, we will hear directly from those who claim to have experienced this program firsthand, individuals whose lives have been permanently altered by encounters they never sought and cannot fully understand. Abductee testimonies and case studies in depth. The phenomenon becomes real only when we hear from those who have lived it. Behind the theories, the historical accounts, and the scientific speculation are real people whose lives have been disrupted and transformed by experiences that defy conventional understanding. These are not attention seekers or fantasists. They are teachers, mechanics, nurses, accountants, soldiers, and students who share one unwanted commonality. They have been taken, examined, and used in a program they did not consent to and cannot escape. Their testimonies, when examined in aggregate, reveal patterns too consistent to dismiss and details too specific to be cultural contamination or false memory. These are their stories, presented in their own words as much as possible, accounts that deserve to be heard even if they cannot yet be fully believed or understood. Jennifer was 19 years old, a college sophomore studying biology, when her experiences began consciously. She had always been a rational person, skeptical of paranormal claims, focused on her education and planning a career in medical research. That rationality made what happened to her even more disturbing because it forced her to question everything she thought she knew about reality. It began with a dream that felt too vivid, too real. She was in her dorm room, aware of being in bed but unable to move. Blue light filled the space, and 3 small beings stood at the foot of her bed. They had large heads, enormous black eyes that seemed to look directly into her soul, and thin gray bodies. One approached and touched her forehead. The next thing she remembered was waking up in the morning with an inexplicable sense of violation and a small, perfectly circular mark on her inner thigh that hadn't been there the night before. Jennifer tried to dismiss the experience as a nightmare combined with an ordinary bruise or skin condition. But the experiences continued, occurring every few weeks. Missing time became a regular occurrence, going to bed at midnight and suddenly finding it was morning, with 7 hours gone in what felt like seconds. She began finding marks on her body, scoop marks on her legs and arms, linear scars that appeared overnight, and once, a small lump under the skin of her calf that moved when she pressed on it. She visited doctors who found no explanation for the marks and who located the lump on ultrasound, but could not identify what it was. When they attempted to remove it surgically, it had mysteriously disappeared, no longer visible on pre-surgery imaging. The memories began surfacing spontaneously during her junior year. She would be sitting in class or driving and suddenly have a flash of memory, lying on a table, beings standing over her, instruments she couldn't identify being used on her body, feelings of helplessness and fear. The memories came with emotional intensity that left her shaking and disoriented. She sought help from a therapist who specialized in trauma, and it was this therapist, familiar with abduction phenomenon, who suggested hypnotic regression to help Jennifer process what seemed to be traumatic memories that had been suppressed. Jennifer was skeptical but desperate for answers and relief from the anxiety and nightmares that were affecting her academic performance and relationships. Under hypnosis, Jennifer recovered detailed memories of multiple abduction experiences. She described being floated through her dorm room wall, ascending in a beam of light to a craft hovering above the campus. Inside, she was placed on a table in a curved room with ambient lighting. The beings conducted examinations, focusing particularly on her reproductive system. She described a thin probe being inserted vaginally, reaching deep into her uterus, causing discomfort, but not quite pain. They extracted something, eggs, she believed, through a procedure that felt both mechanical and organic. During one session, she recovered memories of a different experience. She was brought to a room where several small children stood, looking almost human, but with slightly too large eyes and pale, luminous skin. One of the beings communicated telepathically that these were her children, that she needed to hold them and bond with them. Jennifer reported feeling conflicting emotions, an immediate maternal instinct combined with revulsion at the children's otherness and rage at being forced into this situation without consent. The most disturbing memory Jennifer recovered was of a later abduction where she was shown a child, perhaps 5 years old, with wispy blonde hair and large hazel eyes. The child's features were a clear blend of human and something else. The being present communicated that this was her daughter, created from eggs taken during earlier abductions. The child approached tentatively, and Jennifer found herself crying, holding this being that was genetically her child but who she had never carried, never birthed, never raised. The child was quiet, observing Jennifer with an intensity that seemed far beyond her apparent age. She touched Jennifer's face, and Jennifer felt a rush of emotions and images that seemed to come from the child's mind. Loneliness, curiosity about the human mother she saw only occasionally, and a sense of existing between worlds, belonging to neither fully. After what felt like 20 minutes, the child was taken away, and Jennifer was returned to her dorm room. She woke the next morning with tear stains on her face and an overwhelming sense of grief. Jennifer's experiences have continued into her adult life. Now 34, married, and a practicing physician, she has learned to live with her reality. She keeps her experiences private except within the abductee support community she found online. Her husband knows and has been supportive, though he struggles to truly believe despite witnessing some of her missing time episodes and seeing marks appear on her body overnight. Jennifer has had 2 normal human children, but reports that during her pregnancies, the abductions became more frequent, as if the beings were monitoring her and the developing fetuses. She describes a recent experience where she was shown a teenage hybrid who she believes is the same daughter she held as a young child years ago. The hybrid looked predominantly human now, beautiful and ethereal, with unusual abilities, including what appeared to be telepathic communication. The being indicated to Jennifer that this daughter would soon be integrated into human society, that she would live among humans, and that Jennifer might encounter her in ordinary life without recognition. This possibility haunts Jennifer, the idea that her hybrid daughter is out there somewhere, perhaps passing her on the street, living a life Jennifer can never be part of. Michael's experience is different, demonstrating the diversity within the phenomenon. A construction worker from rural Montana, Michael is a no-nonsense practical man who spent the first 40 years of his life thinking UFOs and aliens were nonsense. His perspective changed abruptly during a hunting trip in 2015. He was camping alone in wilderness backcountry, miles from the nearest road, when he saw lights in the sky moving in ways that violated physics as he understood it. The lights descended, and Michael found himself unable to move, paralyzed, while watching a craft land perhaps 50 yards from his campsite. Beings emerged. He describes them as tall, perhaps 7 feet, with elongated bodies and large eyes, but more human-appearing than the typical grays. They approached him, and though he couldn't move, he could hear their voices in his mind, calm and reassuring, telling him not to be afraid. Michael was taken aboard the craft where he underwent examination. Unlike many abductees who describe traumatic procedures, Michael reports being treated almost gently, as if the beings were concerned about his comfort. They showed him images on screens or directly in his mind. He's not sure which, of Earth from space, of environmental destruction, of future scenarios that ranged from catastrophic to hopeful. They communicated that changes were coming to Earth, that humans needed to evolve or adapt to survive these changes, and that programs were underway to help facilitate this adaptation. When asked directly about his role, they indicated that his genetics had been sampled and that offspring existed that carried both his genetics and theirs. They showed him a male child, perhaps 8 years old, with dark hair and eyes that were large but not quite alien in appearance. The child was strong and healthy looking, and Michael felt an immediate connection despite the bizarre circumstances. What makes Michael's case particularly interesting is his positive interpretation of the experience. Unlike many abductees who feel violated and traumatized, Michael came away feeling he had been chosen for something important, that despite the strangeness and his initial terror, the beings were not malevolent. They were conducting a program they believed was necessary, and his participation was valued. This doesn't mean Michael consented. He's clear that he had no choice, and that the beings' disregard for his autonomy was wrong, but he interprets their motives as ultimately oriented toward preservation rather than harm. Michael has had several subsequent experiences, always in remote locations when he's alone. He now seeks out these locations, camping in wilderness areas, and almost hoping for contact. He describes developing abilities since his experiences began: enhanced intuition, the ability to sense the emotions of others, and occasional prophetic dreams that later come true. He believes these abilities were somehow activated or enhanced by the procedures the beings conducted. Dr. Sarah Chen presents a different perspective as a clinical psychologist who treats abduction experiencers while being one herself. Dr. Chen's professional background makes her case particularly credible, and her analysis of the phenomenon uniquely informed. Her experiences began in childhood, with memories of small beings visiting her room, of being taken to strange places, of seeing hybrid children. As a child, she had no framework to understand these experiences and simply incorporated them into her worldview as visits from the special friends. Only in her teenage years did she encounter literature about alien abduction and realize that her special friends matched descriptions of gray aliens and that her experiences were part of a larger phenomenon. Dr. Chen's decision to specialize in trauma psychology was directly influenced by her own experiences and her desire to understand them. In her practice, she has treated over 200 individuals reporting abduction experiences, conducting hypnotic regressions, traditional therapy, and group sessions. She notes that the consistency of reports across her clients, many of whom had never read abduction literature or communicated with other experiencers before therapy, suggests a genuine phenomenon rather than cultural fantasy. The emotional distress is real. PTSD symptoms, anxiety, relationship difficulties, trust issues, consistent with people who have undergone actual trauma, not those elaborating fantasies. Dr. Chen is careful to note that not all claimed abductions are genuine, that some cases involve sleep paralysis, false memories, or psychological conditions. But after decades of work in the field, she is convinced that a core phenomenon exists that cannot be explained through conventional psychology. Dr. Chen's own experiences have continued into adulthood, occurring every few months. She describes recent experiences as less frightening than childhood encounters, almost routine, though never comfortable. She has shown her hybrid children regularly now, multiple offspring of various ages. Some look predominantly alien, others predominantly human. She has been told she has more than a dozen hybrid offspring. Created over the decades, the program has been utilizing her genetic material. One in particular, a young woman who appears almost fully human with only slightly unusual eyes and an ethereal quality, has become almost like a daughter to her in the brief times they interact during abductions. This hybrid has been given a human name, Emma, and has been taught about human culture and emotions through these bonding sessions with Dr. Chen. Emma communicates that she will soon be placed into human society, given identity documents and a cover story, and will live as a human despite her hybrid nature. Dr. Chen reports mixed emotions, maternal love and worry for this being she's bonded with, but also ethical concerns about the deception involved in integrating hybrids into society without humans' knowledge, and anger that she has been used to create these children without consent and can never have a normal relationship with them. The case of the Martinez family demonstrates that abductions can be multi-generational. Rosa Martinez, now 68, reports experiences that began when she was a child in Puerto Rico. Her mother and grandmother had also reported unusual experiences, though the cultural context interpreted them as encounters with spirits or demons rather than aliens. Rosa's experiences followed typical patterns: missing time, examinations, reproductive procedures. Her 3 children, all now adults, report similar experiences. Most significantly, her granddaughter, Maria, now 15, has characteristics that Rosa believes mark her as having increased hybrid genetics. Maria has exceptionally large eyes, an unusual blue-green color not present in the family previously. She displays cognitive abilities far beyond her age, teaching herself multiple languages, understanding complex mathematics intuitively, and showing what can only be described as psychic abilities, knowing things about people she couldn't possibly know through normal means. Maria has conscious memories of her experiences, not requiring hypnosis, and reports that the beings have told her she is special, that she has an important role to play in the future. She describes feeling different from other teenagers, not quite fitting in, feeling more connected to something beyond Earth than to human society. The Martinez family's multi-generational experiences suggest genetic tracking across generations, that once a family is entered into the program, subsequent generations are monitored and utilized. It also suggests that the hybrid characteristics are becoming more pronounced, that with each generation, the genetic modifications are more evident and the offspring display more obviously non-human traits. Maria reports that she knows other teenagers at her school who she believes are also hybrids or human-alien offspring, recognizing them by their eyes, their energy, and an ineffable quality of otherness. She says they can recognize each other, that there's an instant awareness when they encounter one another, though most don't speak openly about it. If Maria's perceptions are accurate, it suggests that hybrid integration into human populations is well underway, that high schools and colleges may have significant numbers of young hybrids living among fully human students, undetected by those who don't know what to look for. Not all cases are dramatic. Thomas is a retired accountant whose experiences were so subtle he didn't recognize them for decades. He had vague memories of unusual dreams, occasional missing time, inexplicable scars, but never connected these to abduction phenomenon until his late 50s when his adult daughter revealed her own experiences. Father and daughter compared notes and realized their experiences paralleled each other, occurring during the same time periods, suggesting they were being taken together. Thomas underwent regression therapy and recovered memories of being aboard craft with his daughter, both being examined, and later being presented with hybrid children who were apparently genetic offspring of both of them, his daughter's children, but also carrying his genetics as the maternal grandfather. This case raises disturbing questions about the breeding program's specifics and whether multiple family members' genetics are being combined in single hybrid offspring. The common threads across these diverse cases are striking. Nearly all experiencers report paralyzing fear during initial experiences that sometimes evolves into resignation or even acceptance, missing time that corresponds with abduction episodes, physical evidence including marks, scars, and alleged implants, reproductive focus of procedures, encounters with hybrid children, telepathic communication from the beings, profound emotional impact including grief over hybrid offspring they cannot parent, and difficulty in relationships and social functioning due to the secret they carry. The psychological toll is severe and lasting. Many experiencers develop chronic anxiety, depression, PTSD symptoms, and struggle with intimate relationships due to the violation they've endured and the bizarre reality they inhabit that most people cannot understand or believe. Support groups have formed, both in person and online, where experiencers can share their stories without judgment and find community among others who understand. These groups serve crucial functions: validation that they are not insane, practical coping strategies for dealing with ongoing experiences, emotional support for the grief and trauma, and information sharing about the phenomenon's patterns and possible meanings. Some experiencers have channeled their experiences into activism, publicly sharing their stories despite ridicule, trying to raise awareness of what they believe is happening to thousands or millions of humans without consent. Others remain private, sharing only within the experiencer community, unwilling to risk their reputations and relationships by going public. The impact on families is profound when one member is an experiencer and others are not. Marriages have ended because non-experiencer spouses cannot believe or cope with their partner's claims. Children have been taken into protective custody when parents have disclosed experiences to therapists who interpret their accounts as delusional psychosis. Jobs have been lost when experiencers have spoken openly and employers have deemed them mentally unstable. The social cost of being an experiencer in a culture that denies and ridicules the phenomenon is severe, adding secondary trauma to the primary trauma of the experiences themselves. Yet despite all the reasons to remain silent, experiencers continue to come forward. Their courage in sharing these accounts, knowing the ridicule and professional damage they risk, suggests genuine conviction that something real has happened to them. These are not people seeking fame or fortune. Most remain anonymous or use pseudonyms, gaining nothing except the opportunity to be heard and perhaps contribute to eventual understanding and acknowledgement of the phenomenon. Their testimonies, consistent across culture, geography, and time, form the foundation of our understanding of the hybrid program. They deserve to be heard, to be taken seriously, and to have their experiences investigated by institutions with resources and expertise, rather than dismissed by a culture unwilling to confront the possibility that something utterly strange and unauthorized has been happening to human beings for decades or longer. As we continue this investigation, we will explore who these beings conducting the program might be, what we know about their origins, motives, and ultimate goals for humanity. The beings behind the program, who are they and what do they want? They are the architects of humanity's most profound mystery, the intelligence behind the hybrid program, the beings whose motives and origins remain shrouded in ambiguity, despite decades of encounters and research. Who are they? Where do they come from? What do they want with humanity? And most importantly, what are they trying to create through this extensive program of genetic manipulation? The answers that emerge from abductee testimony, from patterns in the phenomenon, and from analysis of their behavior and technology are fragmentary and often contradictory, but they paint a picture of non-human intelligence operating with complex motives on timescales that dwarf human planning horizons. The Greys are the most commonly reported entities involved in the hybrid program, so ubiquitous in abduction accounts that they have become the archetypal alien in popular culture. They are described with remarkable consistency, standing approximately 3 to 5 feet tall, with disproportionately large heads that comprise perhaps a quarter to a third of their total body mass. Their skulls are elongated, sometimes described as pear-shaped, wider at the top than at the base. The eyes are enormous, dominating the face, completely black or very dark, with no visible pupil, sclera, or iris, giving them an appearance of liquid darkness. Some witnesses report that these eyes are actually a covering or lens over smaller eyes beneath. Biological or technological eye protection that allows them to see in Earth's environment. The nose is minimal or absent, sometimes just 2 small slits or holes. The mouth is a simple slit, rarely seen to open with no visible teeth or tongue. Ears are absent or minimally present as slight indentations. The skin is gray or grayish-blue, smooth and hairless, with a texture described variously as reptilian, amphibian, or synthetic. The body is thin and frail appearing, with long arms ending in 3 or 4 elongated fingers. No thumb in many descriptions, though some report a thumb-like digit. The legs are short relative to the torso and arms, the overall proportions appearing unbalanced by human standards. The Greys move with precise, efficient motions, gliding rather than walking in some accounts, suggesting either advanced control over their musculature or possibly anti-gravity technology. They seem to operate collectively, often appearing in groups of 3 or 4, moving in coordination, as if responding to a single directing intelligence. Their communication is entirely telepathic in nearly all reports. They are never heard to speak aloud. The telepathic communication is described as thoughts appearing directly in the experiencer's mind, sometimes accompanied by emotional content, images, or holographic displays that seem to be projected directly into consciousness. The communication is typically simple and directive: instructions to comply, reassurances not to be afraid, occasional explanations of procedures, and rare glimpses of larger purpose or motivation. The behavior of the Greys is clinical, efficient, and seemingly without empathy in most accounts. They conduct their procedures with the detached professionalism of scientists working with laboratory animals. They are not cruel for cruelty's sake, but they are unmoved by human fear, pain, or distress. When experiencers plead for release, for explanation, for mercy, the Greys typically ignore these appeals or respond with telepathic messages that the procedures are necessary and will continue regardless of the human's wishes. This indifference to human suffering is one of the most disturbing aspects of the phenomenon. It suggests either that the Greys lack emotional understanding entirely, that they view humans as so inferior that our suffering doesn't register as morally relevant, or that their mission is so important that human comfort is an acceptable sacrifice. Yet there are accounts of variations in Grey behavior. Some experiencers report encountering Greys who seem more empathetic, who offer gentle telepathic reassurance, who appear to understand that the procedures are frightening and attempt to minimize distress. Whether these represent individual variation among Greys, different subspecies or types of Greys, or simply different approaches to the same task is unclear. Some researchers have proposed hierarchies within the Greys: shorter, more robotic Greys that conduct basic procedures, taller Greys with larger craniums that supervise and direct operations, and possibly even distinct subspecies or races of Greys from different origins working on the same program. The origin of the Greys remains speculative. The most common theory is that they are extraterrestrial, coming from a solar system, perhaps in the Zeta Reticuli star system, based on claims made by Betty Hill under hypnosis, in which she described being shown a star map. Skeptics note that the Hill star map interpretation is controversial and may not actually depict Zeta Reticuli. Other theories propose the Greys originate from elsewhere in our galaxy, from another dimension, or even from Earth's future, representing time-traveling evolved humans or post-humans conducting genetic archaeology on their evolutionary ancestors. The time travel theory gains some support from the Greys' reported interest in human emotion and reproduction, possibly suggesting they represent a future where humanity has lost these capacities and is attempting to recover them by creating hybrids that blend future and current human genetics. Another possibility is that the Greys are themselves artificial, biological robots or engineered servitors created by another intelligence to conduct the program. This would explain their seeming lack of emotion, their collective behavior, and their perfect suitability for the repetitive medical procedures they perform. Some abductees report that the Greys seem almost mechanical in their movements and interactions, following programmed routines rather than displaying initiative or adaptation. If the Greys are biological machines, then behind them stands an intelligence that created them, an intelligence whose nature and motives may be entirely separate from the Greys themselves. This raises the disturbing possibility that the beings we encounter are not the true architects of the program, but merely tools of something else entirely, something we have never directly encountered. The taller beings, often called Nordics or tall whites in the literature, represent a different type of entity, sometimes reported in conjunction with the hybrid program. These beings are described as standing 6 to 7 feet tall, with proportions similar to tall, thin humans. Their skin is pale, almost luminescent white, or with a slight bluish tint. Their hair is typically white, platinum blonde, or very light, fine in texture, sometimes appearing almost translucent. Their eyes are large, but more human in proportion than gray eyes, often described as blue, violet, or green, with visible pupils and irises. Their features are described as extraordinarily beautiful by human standards, with perfect symmetry, delicate bone structure, and an ethereal quality. They move with grace and display what seems to be emotional capacity, though muted compared to typical human affect. The role of the Nordics in the hybrid program appears supervisory or liaison-focused. They are less commonly reported conducting the actual medical procedures and more often present as overseers, as beings who explain aspects of the program to confused abductees, or who present hybrid children to human parents during bonding sessions. The Nordics seem more concerned with the emotional and psychological aspects of the program than the Greys, sometimes offering reassurance, explanation, or even apology for the distress caused. Some experiencers report developing ongoing relationships with specific Nordic beings across multiple abduction experiences, receiving communications about the program's purpose, Earth's future, and the role hybrids will play. The Nordics' origin is equally mysterious. Some researchers believe they represent an ancient human breakaway civilization, humans who left Earth in distant past and have evolved separately, now returning to conduct genetic programs with their terrestrial cousins. Others propose they are from other star systems, a humanoid species that evolved independently but convergently with Earth humans. Still others suggest they may be future humans, even more evolved than the Greys, conducting parallel programs or overseeing Grey activities. Some of the more controversial theories propose the Nordics are the gods of ancient human legends, beings who have interacted with humanity throughout history, sometimes worshipped, sometimes feared, always operating with agendas that serve their purposes rather than humanity's. Less commonly reported but present in the literature are reptilian entities, beings described as having scaly skin, vertical slit pupils, and other reptilian characteristics while maintaining humanoid body plans. These beings are typically described as tall, powerful, and emanating an aura of dominance or authority. Their role in the hybrid program is unclear from the limited reports, but they appear to occupy positions of authority, possibly overseeing operations or having interests in the program's outcomes. The reptilian hypothesis is among the most controversial in ufology, often dismissed as too fantastic, even by researchers who accept Grey encounters, yet the reports persist across multiple independent witnesses who had no contact with each other or exposure to reptilian mythology before their experiences. The question of motive, what these beings want, and why they are conducting the hybrid program yields multiple theoretical answers, none fully satisfying and none verified by direct communication from the beings themselves. The most commonly proposed theories include genetic rescue, environmental preparation, species integration, long-term colonization, and cosmic evolution. The genetic rescue theory proposes that the alien species, particularly the Greys, are facing genetic crisis, perhaps through millennia of cloning, through loss of genetic diversity, through environmental damage to their genome, or through over-reliance on technology at the expense of biological vitality. They have reached a point where their species is dying. Human genetics, diverse, robust, and rich in emotional and reproductive capacity, represent genetic resources they desperately need. By creating human-alien hybrids, they preserve their own genetic legacy, while revitalizing their genome with human genetic material. The hybrids would represent a new species capable of continuing the alien genetic line while incorporating the vitality and adaptability humans possess. This theory is supported by communications some experiencers report receiving, suggestions that the being species is in decline and that the program represents their attempt at survival through merger with humanity. The environmental preparation theory suggests the hybrid program is creating beings capable of surviving in conditions that pure humans cannot. If Earth faces environmental catastrophes, climate change, nuclear war, asteroid impact, magnetic pole shift, that would make the planet barely habitable for current humans, hybrids engineered to survive in extreme conditions might be necessary for continuation of human genetic legacy. The beings conducting the program may have knowledge of Earth's future, either through advanced predictive capabilities or because they have experienced these events in their own past or on their own worlds. Creating hybrids that can survive in high radiation, extreme temperatures, altered atmospheric conditions, or other post-catastrophe environments would ensure that humanity, in hybrid form, persists even if pure humans cannot. This theory frames the program as ultimately benevolent, a preservation effort for human genetics, even if the methods violate human autonomy. The species integration theory proposes that the hybrid program is preparation for eventual open contact and integration between human and alien civilizations. Direct contact between such different species might be fraught with biological incompatibility, psychological trauma, or social breakdown. But if a bridge population exists, hybrids who are part human and part alien, who understand both civilizations, who can serve as translators, diplomats, and mediators, integration could proceed more smoothly. The hybrids would be humanity's introduction to cosmic civilization, beings who can help us understand the aliens while helping the aliens understand us. This theory suggests the program is long-term preparation for an eventual reveal, a process that might span multiple generations to create sufficient hybrid populations capable of facilitating the transition. The long-term colonization theory is more sinister, proposing that the hybrid program represents slow-motion invasion and replacement of humanity. Rather than overt military conquest, which might fail or prove too costly, the aliens are conducting genetic conquest, gradually replacing pure humans with hybrid populations that carry alien genetics and possibly alien programming or loyalties. Each generation of hybrids is more human in appearance, but still carries alien genetic material and potentially alien consciousness or control. Over time, as hybrids integrate into human populations and interbreed with humans, the alien genetics spread throughout humanity until pure humans no longer exist, replaced by a hybrid species that appears human but serves alien interests. This theory frames the program as hostile colonization using biological warfare spanning multiple generations. The cosmic evolution theory proposes that the program is part of a universal process by which intelligent species merge and evolve together, that genetic isolation is an early stage of development that advanced civilizations transcend. The beings conducting the program may view genetic diversity and cross-species integration as natural steps in cosmic evolution, a process they have undergone multiple times and are now facilitating for humanity. From this perspective, humanity's merger with alien genetics isn't conquest or rescue, but participation in a natural cosmic process, an upgrade that will allow us to take our place in a larger community of integrated species. This theory suggests the beings see themselves as benefactors, facilitating humanity's evolution to the next stage, even if humans don't yet understand or appreciate the gift being offered. Analysis of the being's actions suggests several conclusions regardless of their ultimate motives. First, they operate with long-term planning horizons far exceeding human norms, conducting a program that has spanned at least decades and possibly millennia with patience and consistency that suggests either extreme longevity or cultural continuity maintained across many generations. Second, they possess technology so advanced that it appears almost magical, faster than light travel or dimensional shifting to reach Earth, manipulation of matter, allowing passage through walls, gravity control for levitation and beam transport, consciousness manipulation for telepathy and memory suppression, and genetic engineering far beyond current human capabilities. Third, they operate outside human legal and ethical frameworks, taking what they want from humans without consent or compensation, suggesting either profound moral disconnect or a utilitarian framework where individual rights are subordinate to species-level goals. Fourth, they appear to be following a specific protocol or program that is systematic and widespread, not random experiments, but organized operations with clear goals and standardized procedures refined through many iterations. Fifth, they avoid direct confrontation with human military and government power, operating through stealth and secrecy rather than open force, suggesting either that they want to minimize disruption to human society or that they are vulnerable to human resistance in ways we might not expect. Sixth, they show particular interest in human reproduction, emotions, and consciousness, the aspects of humanity that are most definitively biological and evolutionary, suggesting these are either what they lack and need from us or what they consider most valuable about humans. The beings themselves remain enigmatic despite thousands of encounters. They answer few questions, provide minimal information, and operate behind a veil of secrecy that has persisted despite human attempts to penetrate it. Whether Whether this secrecy serves to prevent panic, to allow the program to proceed without interference, or because revelation of their true nature and motives would be too disturbing for humans to accept remains unknown. What is clear is that they are vastly more advanced technologically, that they have been interacting with humanity for a considerable time, that they are conducting a genetic program of enormous scope, and that this program appears to be progressing towards some endpoint they envision but have not clearly communicated to the human populations being used to achieve it. As we continue this investigation, we will examine how the phenomenon manifests globally across different cultures and civilizations, and whether the patterns reveal anything about the being's ultimate agenda. Global patterns and cultural manifestations across civilizations. The hybrid program is not confined to the United States or Western countries, despite these regions producing the most documented accounts in English language literature. Investigation reveals that the phenomenon is truly global, occurring in every inhabited continent, across vastly different cultures, among populations with no contact with Western media or UFO mythology. This universality is crucial to understanding the phenomenon. If abduction accounts were purely cultural constructs, products of science fiction and media contamination, we would expect significant variation in reports based on cultural background, with accounts matching local folklore and belief systems. Instead, what we find is remarkable cross-cultural consistency in core elements: the being's appearance, the procedures conducted, the focus on reproduction, and the presence of hybrid children. This consistency, despite cultural isolation, suggests a genuine phenomenon rather than cultural invention. In Brazil, particularly in the Amazon basin, indigenous communities have reported encounters for generations, described in their traditional context as interactions with sky spirits or forest guardians. When researchers began investigating these accounts and comparing them to modern abduction reports from industrialized nations, the parallels were striking. Indigenous witnesses described small beings with large eyes and heads, craft that descended from the sky, being taken aboard and examined, reproductive procedures, including extraction of semen or eggs, and encounters with children who appeared part human and part other. These accounts existed in oral tradition long before these communities had access to television, internet, or Western UFO literature, yet they match modern abduction accounts in specific details that are difficult to explain as coincidence or cultural contamination. The Brazilian government has taken UFO phenomena more seriously than many Western governments. Brazil officially investigated thousands of UFO reports through military operations like Operation Saucer in the 1970s, documenting encounters in the Amazon region where villagers reported being attacked or examined by beings from aerial craft. The military's own reports, later released, describe injuries consistent with radiation exposure, beams of light that seem to have physical effect, and witnesses experiencing missing time and medical symptoms following encounters. While Operation Saucer focused primarily on close encounter cases rather than abductions specifically, the patterns suggest the same phenomenon operating in rural Brazil that researchers were documenting in American suburbs. In Africa, the phenomenon takes on characteristics shaped by local culture and interpretation while maintaining core consistency. The aerial school incident in Zimbabwe in 1994 provides one of the most compelling multi-witness cases. 62 school children, ages 6 to 12, witnessed a craft land near their playground and observed beings emerge. The beings were described as having large heads, big eyes, and wearing tight-fitting black suits. Several children reported receiving telepathic communications about environmental destruction and humanity's future. The children's accounts were consistent, their drawings of the beings remarkably similar despite being done independently. Harvard psychiatrist John Mack investigated and found the children credible, displaying genuine emotion when recounting their experiences and no evidence of collaboration or influence. The aerial case is significant because the children had minimal exposure to UFO media, coming from a mix of backgrounds in a country where American television was not prevalent, yet their descriptions matched standard gray descriptions precisely. In South Africa, Traditional healers and shamans, the sangomas, report experiences that blend indigenous spiritual framework with what Western researchers would recognize as abduction scenarios. Sangomas describe being taken by the ancestors or spirits, undergoing initiations that involve being taken to underground or underwater realms where they receive teaching and undergo physical transformation. When these accounts are examined closely, elements emerge that parallel abduction experiences, missing time, medical procedures conducted by non-human entities, genetic or reproductive focus, and return with enhanced abilities, including healing and intuitive powers. Whether these represent the same phenomenon interpreted through indigenous cosmology or separate spiritual experiences that coincidentally resemble abductions is debated, but the parallels are extensive enough to warrant consideration that Sangoma initiation experiences may represent the phenomenon operating within African traditional context. In Russia and the former Soviet states, UFO research continued even during the Cold War, though much of it remained classified. Soviet military documents released after the fall of the Soviet Union reveal extensive tracking of UFO activity, military encounters with unknown craft, and cases of personnel experiencing missing time and medical effects following close encounters. Russian researchers investigating abduction claims found patterns identical to those in the West: grays, reproductive procedures, hybrid children, memory suppression. Notably, Soviet-era witnesses had no access to American abduction literature or media due to censorship and isolation, yet their accounts matched American cases in specific procedural details, suggesting a genuine phenomenon rather than cultural diffusion of a Western mythology. In China, the phenomenon is reported but less openly discussed due to cultural factors and government control of information. Chinese ufology exists in a semi-underground state, with researchers and experiencers communicating through private networks rather than public forums. However, accounts that do emerge show familiar patterns: encounters with large-eyed beings, missing time, examinations focusing on reproduction, and hybrid children. Chinese cultural interpretation sometimes frames these within traditional concepts of celestial beings or immortals, but the experiential details underlying the interpretations match global patterns. The Chinese government has conducted official investigations of UFO phenomena, though details remain largely classified. Leaked information suggests that Chinese military and scientific establishments take the phenomenon seriously and have documented cases similar to those known in the West. Japan presents an interesting case where advanced industrialization, extensive media exposure, and traditional cultural elements combine. Japanese UFO researchers have documented hundreds of abduction accounts following patterns seen globally. Interestingly, some accounts include entities that match gray descriptions, while others describe beings that seem more aligned with Japanese cultural expectations of how aliens might appear. This suggests possible cultural influence on perception, with experiencers interpreting ambiguous beings through cultural lenses. However, the core procedural elements remain consistent: paralysis, transport to craft, medical examination, reproductive focus, and memory suppression. Japanese researchers note that accounts from rural areas with less media exposure tend to match global patterns more precisely than accounts from urban areas, supporting the interpretation that core experiences are real, while cultural overlay affects interpretation and description. In India, the phenomenon exists within a cultural context rich with traditions of celestial beings, avatars, and non-human intelligences. Hindu cosmology includes multiple realms of existence and numerous types of beings, making integration of UFO and abduction experiences into existing worldview relatively seamless for some Indians. Accounts from India include encounters with gray-type beings, craft sightings and landings, and abduction experiences, but these are often interpreted through dharmic frameworks as encounters with devas, asuras, or other traditional categories of beings. Indian researchers examining these cases note that when cultural interpretation is separated from experiential description, the core accounts match global patterns precisely. Additionally, India's ancient texts, the Vedas, Mahabharata, and other scriptures contain accounts that some interpret as ancient encounters with the same phenomenon, suggesting the activity has been occurring in the Indian subcontinent for millennia. Australia's Aboriginal populations have traditions of sky beings stretching back tens of thousands of years into the dream time. the mythological era when the world was created and beings moved between earth and sky. Some Aboriginal accounts describe the Wandjina, powerful sky spirits with large eyes, pale faces, and no mouths, depicted in ancient rock art that bears striking resemblance to modern gray descriptions. Contemporary Aboriginal communities report ongoing encounters with lights in the sky, beings matching gray descriptions, and experiences of being taken and examined. The continuity between ancient tradition and modern experience is remarkable, suggesting the phenomenon may have been interacting with Aboriginal populations throughout their entire history in Australia, spanning perhaps 50,000 years or more. The Middle East, cradle of the Abrahamic religions, presents complex intersection of the phenomenon with religious tradition. Modern reports from Middle Eastern countries include standard abduction accounts, though cultural and religious interpretation colors how experiencers understand and discuss their experiences. Some frame encounters as demonic, others as angelic or divine, while still others interpret them in modern extraterrestrial terms. The region's ancient history includes accounts that could represent early encounters, biblical angels appearing to prophets, ascending and descending on beams of light, taking individuals to heaven for instruction and returning them transformed. The line between religious experience and contact experience blurs in many Middle Eastern accounts, suggesting the possibility that what ancient peoples interpreted as divine intervention might have included elements of the phenomenon we now call alien abduction. Europe, with its long history of fairy lore and folk traditions, shows clear continuity between historical accounts and modern abduction reports. Scandinavian countries particularly have traditions of elves, hidden people, and beings from parallel realms who interact with humans, sometimes taking them to other worlds or producing offspring with them. Modern Scandinavian researchers investigating abduction claims find that when experiencers describe their encounters without cultural interpretation, the beings and procedures match global patterns. The consistency between medieval changeling accounts, fairy abduction stories, and modern alien abduction reports from the same regions is striking. It suggests that either the phenomenon has been occurring in Europe for centuries, with only the cultural interpretation changing, or that human psychology creates identical experience patterns across time periods, which seems less parsimonious given the specificity of details. In Mexico and Central America, regions rich with ancient civilizations and modern indigenous populations, the phenomenon intersects with traditions of gods descending from the sky, creating humans, and producing hybrid offspring with human women. The Mayan, Aztec, and other Mesoamerican cultures have origin stories involving sky beings teaching humanity agriculture, astronomy, and civilization. Contemporary indigenous communities in Central America report encounters with small beings with large eyes, craft in the sky, and experiences of being taken and examined. Mexican researchers have documented numerous cases following standard abduction patterns, with the added element that some experiencers report beings communicating in indigenous languages or showing particular interest in individuals of pure indigenous descent, possibly suggesting genetic interest in specific Native American genetic lineages. Island populations provide particularly interesting cases due to their isolation. Pacific Island communities with minimal Western contact have reported encounters that, when investigated, match global abduction patterns, despite these populations having no exposure to UFO media or literature. Polynesian traditions include accounts of gods arriving from beyond the stars, taking human wives and producing offspring with special abilities. Modern accounts from islands throughout the Pacific describe standard gray encounters, abductions, and hybrid children, suggesting the phenomenon operates even in Earth's most remote locations, targeting populations regardless of their technological development or cultural sophistication. The universality of the phenomenon is one of its most significant characteristics. The beings conducting the program apparently have global reach and have been accessing human populations across all continents, all cultures, and all time periods documented. This suggests extraordinary technological capability for surveillance and access, resources sufficient to conduct simultaneous operations worldwide, and coordination that maintains consistent procedures across vast geographic distances. The program is not targeting a single nation or ethnic group, but appears to be sampling from all human genetic diversity, perhaps collecting the full spectrum of human genetics for the hybridization program. Certain patterns in global distribution are notable. Reports are more frequent from technologically advanced nations, but this likely reflects reporting bias rather than actual frequency. In countries with free press, active UFO research communities, and cultural space for people to discuss unusual experiences, reports surface more readily. In countries with authoritarian governments, strong religious orthodoxy that would interpret such claims as heresy or insanity, or cultural frameworks that discourage discussing unusual personal experiences, reports remain hidden even if experiences occur at similar rates. When researchers investigate in countries with less active public reporting, they typically find that experiences are occurring but not being publicly discussed or documented. Some researchers have noted concentrations of activity in certain regions, the American Southwest, the Amazon basin, remote areas of Australia, parts of China, and various locations correlating with ancient megalithic sites, ley lines, or areas of unusual geological activity. Whether these concentrations are real or artifacts of research distribution is unclear. Possible explanations for regional concentrations include genetic interest in specific populations, convenience of access in remote areas with low population density, presence of underground or underwater bases from which operations are conducted, correlation with Earth's electromagnetic fields or geological features that facilitate their technology, or simply coincidence in where researchers have been active and where witnesses have been willing to report. The cross-cultural consistency of the phenomenon raises profound questions about the nature of reality and human experience. If thousands of people across dozens of cultures, many with no contact with each other or with Western media, are reporting nearly identical experiences, we must either accept that something real is occurring or propose that human psychology universally creates identical complex false experiences for reasons we don't understand. The latter explanation, while possible, requires postulating mechanisms of cultural transmission that violate known limits of human communication and require implausible levels of coincidence in experiential detail. The former explanation, that a real phenomenon is occurring globally, is more parsimonious, though it requires accepting realities that challenge our understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos and the security of our bodies and genetics. The global nature of the program suggests scale and ambition that is staggering. If the phenomenon is operating in dozens of countries simultaneously across multiple continents, accessing populations from hunter-gatherers to post-industrial societies, the resources and coordination required are immense. This is not a small-scale research project, but a planetary operation, a program that treats Earth as a single unit and humanity as a single population to be systematically accessed and utilized. The implications for human sovereignty, collective security, and our self-image as the dominant intelligence on our own planet are devastating. We are not in control. We have never been in control. Something vast, coordinated, and purposeful has been operating on a global scale for decades at minimum, likely centuries or millennia, and there is no evidence that human governments or institutions have been able to stop it, understand it fully, or protect citizens from it. As we approach the final section of this investigation, we must confront what this global phenomenon means for humanity's future and what possibilities lie ahead as the hybrid program appears to be reaching some critical phase or endpoint. Future implications. What this means for humanity's future. We stand at a threshold, a moment in human history that may be recognized by future generations as the point where everything changed, where humanity learned it was not alone, not in control, and not the apex species on its own planet. The hybrid program, if real, is not merely a curiosity or an isolated phenomenon to be investigated and understood. It is an active intervention in human evolution, a program that is shaping what humanity will become in ways we are only beginning to recognize. The future implied by the evidence is simultaneously terrifying and potentially transformative, a future where the boundaries of human identity blur, where the children of Earth carry genetics from the stars, and where humanity must confront its role in a cosmos far stranger and more populated than our ancestors could have imagined. The immediate question is what happens next. If the program has been operating for decades or centuries with the apparent goal of creating viable hybrid populations, we must assume it is progressing towards some endpoint. The reports suggest the program is accelerating, that hybrid populations are increasing, that later generation hybrids are being integrated into human society in growing numbers. If this progression continues, several potential futures emerge, none of which leave humanity unchanged. The first possibility is full disclosure and open contact. At some point, the program might transition from covert to overt operation. The beings conducting it might reveal themselves publicly, acknowledge what they have been doing, present the hybrid populations openly, and explain their reasoning and goals. This disclosure could come through dramatic announcement, through gradual revelation as hybrid populations reach critical mass and begin identifying themselves publicly, or through governmental acknowledgement of what has been known secretly for decades. Full disclosure would transform human civilization overnight. Every assumption about our place in the universe would be overturned. Religious frameworks would face unprecedented challenges as humanity confronts the reality of other intelligences. Social structures would destabilize as people grapple with the revelation that their governments have known and either cooperated with or been powerless to stop the program. Economic systems might collapse if alien technology is introduced that makes current energy, transportation, and production systems obsolete. The psychological impact would be profound, with some people welcoming contact and others experiencing existential crisis. The optimistic disclosure scenario envisions the beings as ultimately benevolent, the hybrid program revealed as preparation for integration into a cosmic community, with hybrids serving as bridges between human and alien civilizations. In this future, humanity gains access to advanced technology, medical knowledge, and wisdom from civilizations millions of years older than ours. We become cosmic citizens, part of a galactic or universal community, shedding our isolation and ignorance. The price paid, loss of purely human genetics, violation of autonomy during the program's covert phase, is acknowledged and potentially even compensated, but framed as necessary steps toward a greater good. Humanity emerges transformed but intact, evolved to a higher state of existence. The pessimistic disclosure scenario reveals the program as malevolent conquest, the hybrids as a replacement population, and humanity as having been conquered through biology rather than warfare. In this future, disclosure comes when it no longer matters because hybrid populations are sufficiently numerous and positioned in key roles, government, military, science, media, that human resistance is futile. Pure humans become a minority, then a rarity, then extinct as hybrid genetics spread through the population. What emerges is no longer humanity as we know it, but something other, something that remembers being human but carries allegiances and consciousness influenced by alien genetic programming. This is species death through assimilation, the end of Homo sapiens not through extinction but through transformation into something fundamentally different. The second possibility is continuation of the status quo, with the program remaining covert indefinitely. The beings maintain secrecy, access human populations as needed, integrate hybrids quietly into society, and achieve their goals without ever openly revealing themselves. This scenario suggests they believe open contact would be counterproductive, that their goals are better served through stealth. In this future, the program continues for generations or centuries more, gradually transforming human genetics through interbreeding with integrated hybrids until the distinction between human and hybrid becomes meaningless. Humanity evolves or devolves, depending on perspective, without realizing it, waking up decades or centuries hence to discover we are no longer purely the species we once were. This gradual transformation might be imperceptible to those living through it, with each generation appearing normal to itself, while the aggregate change over multiple generations is profound. The third possibility is intervention and cessation. Perhaps human governments, having monitored the program through classified projects, finally develop capabilities to resist or negotiate end to abductions. Perhaps another alien faction intervenes, opposing the hybrid program and forcing its cessation. Perhaps the program completes its goals and simply stops, the beings withdrawing having achieved whatever objective motivated the program. In this scenario, humanity might discover the aftermath without experiencing the conclusion. Millions of people worldwide realizing they were part of something vast that has suddenly ended. Hybrid populations discovering they are orphans, abandoned by the creators who brought them into existence. The questions of what to do with the hybrid populations, how to process the collective trauma of the abduction experience, and how to move forward would dominate global discourse. The fourth possibility is catastrophic interruption. If the hybrid program is preparing humanity for survival of some coming catastrophe, environmental collapse, asteroid impact, magnetic pole reversal, solar event, the catastrophe might arrive before the program completes. In this scenario, the choices made by the beings conducting the program become humanity's survival question. If hybrids can survive conditions that kill pure humans, do we embrace the hybrid transformation as our only hope for genetic continuity? Do we resist on principle, even if resistance means extinction? This scenario forces humanity to confront whether species purity matters more than species survival, whether we would rather die as purely human or survive as something hybrid. The implications for human identity are profound, regardless of which future unfolds. Who is human if hybrid genetics permeate our population? At what percentage of alien DNA does someone cease to be human? Does even 1% alien genetic contribution make someone other? These questions have no clear answers because the boundaries of identity are social constructs rather than objective facts. We are who we define ourselves to be, individually and collectively. Hybrid individuals might identify as human, might demand recognition as a new species, or might struggle with identity between two worlds. Human society will face decisions about citizenship, rights, and social acceptance of individuals who are genetically different, but raised in human culture and society. The implications for reproduction and family structure are equally significant. If hybrid individuals are among us and begin forming relationships and families, their offspring will carry and spread hybrid genetics. Should there be restrictions on hybrid reproduction, genetic counseling, or disclosure requirements? Or is such intervention itself a form of genetic discrimination that should be rejected? Families discovering that children or grandchildren carry hybrid genetics will face questions about acceptance, about whether love and family bonds transcend genetic composition. The very concept of family may expand to include hybrid children created through the program, with human parents potentially maintaining relationships with hybrid offspring they never raised but who seek connection with their genetic human relatives. The religious and philosophical implications are profound. The major religions were formulated in the absence of knowledge about extraterrestrial intelligence. How do Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and other faith traditions incorporate the reality of alien intelligence and hybrid children? Some religious thinkers might frame the beings as angels or demons, fitting them into existing theological frameworks. Others might see the need for radical theological revision, recognizing that creation and the divine plan are larger and stranger than traditional teachings encompassed. Still others might reject the phenomenon as deception or evil, regardless of evidence, because accepting it would require abandoning core beliefs about humanity's special status in creation. The collision between ancient religious certainty and new cosmic reality could be the greatest religious crisis since the Enlightenment. The scientific implications are revolutionary. Confirmation that alien intelligence exists, that they possess technology vastly exceeding ours, and that they have successfully conducted cross-species genetic engineering would transform every scientific discipline. Biology would gain access to alien genetics, forcing revision of theories about life's origins and constraints. Physics would confront technology that appears to violate understood laws, requiring expansion of theoretical frameworks. Psychology would grapple with non-human consciousness and telepathic communication, phenomena currently considered impossible or pseudoscientific. Medicine would potentially access healing and genetic technologies that could eliminate disease, extend lifespan, or enhance human capabilities. The acceleration of human knowledge could be dramatic if access to alien understanding is granted or achieved through study of the hybrids and their capabilities. The political implications are destabilizing. If governments have known about the program and kept it secret, public trust in institutions would collapse when revealed. If governments didn't know and couldn't prevent abductions despite military and intelligence apparatuses, it reveals powerlessness that undermines the fundamental social contract where states promise security in exchange for sovereignty. International relations would be transformed as humanity potentially unifies in response to external intelligence, or fractures as different nations adopt different responses to the phenomenon. Power dynamics would shift dramatically if alien technology becomes accessible, with nations or groups that gain access leaping ahead of those that don't. The potential for conflict over access to aliens, to hybrid populations, or to alien technology is significant. The economic implications are potentially revolutionary. Alien technology could render current energy, transportation, and production systems obsolete. Industries employing millions could collapse overnight. Economic power could shift from nations and corporations currently dominant to whoever gains access to new capabilities. The distribution of benefits from alien contact would likely be unequal, following existing power structures, potentially exacerbating inequality rather than reducing it. Alternatively, sufficiently transformative technology might enable post-scarcity economics, eliminating resource constraints that drive current economic systems. The transition period would likely be chaotic regardless of the long-term outcome. The ethical implications demand new frameworks. Our current ethics evolved for a world where humans were the only beings with human-level consciousness and rights. How do we extend or modify ethics to account for alien intelligence with possibly different values, for hybrid beings who are partially human, for technologies that could transform human nature? Questions of consent, violated throughout the abduction phenomenon, take on new urgency. How do we prevent future violations while addressing past ones? Do the beings conducting the program bear moral responsibility by human standards, or do they operate under different ethical frameworks that we must somehow negotiate with rather than judge? These questions have no precedent and no easy answers. For individuals who are experiencers or who discover they are hybrids, the personal future is uniquely challenging. They face decisions about disclosure, about whether to come forward publicly despite ridicule and professional risk. They face questions about whether to seek community with others like them or to try to live normal human lives without acknowledging their experiences. They face potential health consequences, psychological trauma, and relationship challenges that most people will never understand. Yet they may also possess abilities and connections that open possibilities unavailable to ordinary humans. The experiencer and hybrid populations may become a special class, separate from mainstream humanity, potentially advantaged in some ways but marginalized in others. The question of children demands particular attention. If hybrid children are being raised in human families or integrated into schools and communities, they need protection, support, and acceptance. They did not choose their origins any more than anyone chooses to be born. They deserve recognition as individuals with rights, regardless of their genetic composition. Society will face questions about how to educate hybrid children, whether their enhanced abilities require special programs, whether their differences require accommodation, and how to help them navigate identity questions. Parents of hybrid children, whether human parents of hybrid offspring from the program or hybrid parents raising children in human society, need resources and community support that doesn't currently exist. The environmental connection cannot be ignored. Many experiencers report receiving communications about Earth's environmental state, warnings of impending ecological collapse, and suggestions that the hybrid program relates to creating beings who can survive what is coming. If this communication is accurate, the hybrid program might be an emergency response to environmental crisis we have created, an attempt by external intelligence to preserve human genetics and consciousness in a form that can survive the changed Earth our actions are creating. This would cast the program in a different light, not conquest or violation, but attempted rescue, albeit conducted without consent and with methods that violate human autonomy. Whether such rescue justifies the violations is a moral question each person must answer for themselves. The question of human agency is central to any future scenario. Have we been passive subjects of this program, or can we become active participants in determining our future? If the phenomenon is real, humanity faces a choice: remain in denial, continue to ridicule and suppress evidence, maintain institutional secrecy that prevents collective response, or acknowledge the reality, begin open investigation and discussion, develop collective strategies for understanding, and potentially negotiating with the intelligence conducting the program. The choice between continued denial and active engagement will shape what happens next. Denial leaves us passive, things done to us rather than with us. Engagement, however frightening, offers possibility of agency, of having voice in whatever comes next. The final question is the most profound. What does it mean to be human in a universe where we are not alone, where our genetics are being modified by external intelligence, where the species boundaries we thought were absolute are revealed as permeable? Perhaps being human has never been about genetic purity, but about consciousness, culture, and choice. Perhaps humanity is not a fixed biological category, but an evolving identity that can expand to include hybrid descendants while maintaining continuity with our past. Perhaps the lesson of the hybrid program, if it is real, is that we must expand our circle of moral concern, recognize consciousness and rights in beings who are different from us, and accept that the universe is richer, stranger, and more interconnected than we imagined. The future is not written. The hybrid program, if real, is still unfolding. What happens next depends on choices made by the beings conducting it, by human governments and institutions that must decide whether to continue denial or embrace disclosure, and by individuals who must decide how to respond to a reality that challenges every assumption. We may be witnessing the birth of a new humanity, the twilight of the old, or something stranger that we lack the concepts to fully describe. But whatever comes, we will face it as the only beings we can be, humans struggling to understand our place in a cosmos that is revealing itself to be far more mysterious than we ever knew, forever changed by the knowledge that we are not alone and that our children, in ways both terrible and wondrous, may be something more and different than we are. They walk among us. The hybrids are here, in our schools, our workplaces, our families. Whether they represent humanity's future, its replacement, or simply its evolution, the age of human isolation is ending. What comes next will define what it means to be human in ways we are only beginning to understand. The program continues. The question is not whether it is happening, but what we choose to do with the knowledge that we are being transformed, that our children may be different than us, and that the future of humanity may be written in genetic code that originated beyond the stars. The truth, if we are willing to face it, will change everything. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.